And so what I'm saying is that pretty much God is merciful. He is peaceful. He is loving. But out of that love, out of this peace and mercy, he is still a God that judges, right? He is still a God that upholds the law and the power, right, that he set in place. And ultimately, even though he could show, he does show mercy at times, and most of the time he shows mercy, there is times where he now has to judge, where he now has to correct, where he now has to punish, and if he doesn't, he couldn't be a just judge. This is his people, but he still has to judge them as he would judge anyone else, right? He's considered these his people, but he is also the God of the universe. He still judges other nations and such, but he is showing them constant mercies and mercies. And what I see in there is a father that understands that I have to show mercies in certain places. I have to be gentle at times, but there also comes a time where I have to show them that I am the God that I claim to be.
Beauty doesn't exist without ugly. Pleasure doesn't exist without pain. These are things we use to understand the world around us, but also to like compare experiences.
This duality, yeah.
This duality. So how do you know that something is pleasurable? Because it feels different than the pain does. There is no beauty without ugly. There is no pleasure without pain. And therefore, you know, experiencing hardship or suffering in the world is just human experience that maps onto all the pleasure and all of the happiness that you experience as well, right? It's changes to the landscape of experience. That's all it is.
Because that's how you are able to flesh out certain ideas. That's how you're able to at least present different ideas and sit with that and see what that, you know, how that unfolds in your life.
It's important to feel uncomfortable, and it's important to pressure check the things that you believe to be true. Right. And that's across the board, politically, with religiosity, with the way that you understand your relationship with your partner, right? Talk about it and find an understanding, because that's the only way.
And I think if you're not able to, that's worrisome, right? If it's something that you believe and you're not able to really talk about that or flesh that out or defend that in a sense, I think you should be worried.
That's a great.
What you're actually believing, that you're not able to talk about it, or you're not able to really have a conversation with somebody that has an opposite mindset on those topics. It should be something that you think of. This, guys, is a humble, understanding Christian podcast where we have conversations that hopefully glorify Jesus Christ. So let's get into this video today, guys. Welcome, family, to another video. Today, guys, as you see, we got Cody back on once again for part 2. Guys, last time we were here on the Humble Understanding podcast, we were pretty much just getting into Cody and who he is and some of the thoughts and some of the mindset that he pretty much has in regards to life, in regards to how to live his life, and just in some of the things in regards to God and how he felt about him. So I think today, guys, we just wanted to flesh more out of that conversation, trying to kind of ask some questions that weren't asked in the initial video in regards to some of the things he talked about in his upbringing when he got into the second part of his story, but also to see what he thinks in regards to some of the responses to morality and God's existence and his existence being a good God amongst all the bad things we see in the world taking place, and being a loving God, right? So we got a couple of scriptures to bring up with that, just to see what you guys think as well as what Cody thinks about some of those things. And so that's kind of how we're going to jump into it. We're going to start though with some of the things that he talked about in his story first, and then near the second half of the video we'll get into some of those scriptures just to see what his thoughts are on some of those things in regards to what they say as a response to some of those ideas that we talked about previously. So thank you, Cody, once again for coming on.
Beautifully done. That was great.
Let's get right into it, Cody. So I did take notes from our last video, because there's a couple of things that stood out to me when you got into the second part of your story. The first part, we really got to know you in regards to your career, in regards to some of the things that you had going on and were doing. And then second, when you got into your story once again, you really honed in onto some of those things and how your upbringing was and what brought you to a certain point in your life where you started to have a different mindset on certain things. So I wanted to address some of those spots that I guess I would love to see elaborate on, and kind of see what my response is to some of those things as well. So some of those things, or something that stood out to me during the first episode, was when you mentioned having a Catholic upbringing, right? I remember you mentioned Catholicism playing a part in your early life. I know that you said at some point you didn't have anything to do with Christianity until maybe 13 once again. But like, what part of your life did that Catholicism play a role in? And was it an essential part of your life, or was it just something kind of on the side that you just knew your family kind of believed in or had this mindset?
Yeah. So Catholicism didn't play much of a part. It was something that was in the background of my family.
Okay.
So like, I think the average experience for like an Italian family in the South Philly really like the Philly metropolitan area is just like a Catholic upbringing.
Okay.
Right. My dad had, forgive me, I don't know what all the the different like things are called, but my dad has like a Christian middle name, and he was brought up in the Catholic Church. My grandfather's still Catholic to this day.
Okay.
But insofar as like how it affected my life, I don't recall there being anything Catholic. I didn't go to CCD. I didn't go to a Catholic church or anything like that. I just later found out that was like in the mind of my family.
Oh, so it was more so just something that you knew about, and that's pretty much
it.
When it comes to practice, there was
I remember this one time in particular that I don't remember why I went to the Catholic church, but I was at a Catholic church with my family, and we were doing the little wafer.
Yeah, communion.
Thank you. We were doing communion, and they wouldn't let me take communion because I didn't know like what to say, and I wasn't Catholic.
Right.
And it was a little embarrassing, but it's also like I went and sat down, and I was like, whatever, dude. Like,
are you just like, this is how they do things, or you just like?
To me, it was just a cracker and some like grape juice. So I was like really not that concerned about it. I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing here. So
because I know to them, I think it's they're considering it, and I would say that technically I'm not Catholic, right? I'm Protestant technically, right? So just not Catholic, right? I guess in a sense. And not to say that Catholics also could be Christian, right? But in a sense, because that's solely on, in a sense, your belief in Jesus Christ and He's being the Son of God and such and such. But the differences being they have different practices, right? They have a bunch of things that are religious duties that they take part in that some may consider essential to your salvation, and communion being one of them. But also communion for them looks like, and what communion is, just to put that out there first, in regards to what Scripture says, it's pretty much you, as you eat the bread, as you drink the wine or the juice as a representation. It's ultimately a representation of Jesus, you taking part in Jesus Christ and His death, burial, and resurrection. And so, for them, I could see how it'd be one of those important things that, when you pretty much save that for those who actually are following Christ, right? Because in the Protestant church, for example, that usually gets tied in with after you're baptized, then you could take communion, because it's more so, this is an example, public display showing that you follow Christ, right? So if you don't, then it'd be almost pointless for you to, take in that sense, right? Because you're taking part in that remembrance of what He did. Yeah. Ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, like, obviously they're not going to stand at the front of the mass and be like, okay, if you're not a Catholic, you're seated.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I understand why it happened the way it happened. And I did participate in communion when I was a part of that non-denominational church. It was just like a thing we did, and I don't recall ever being baptized. So like, I don't know where that falls into Scripture, but
it's not necessarily like you have to be baptized first. It's more so,
I understand the concept, and I understand like why Jesus did what He did. I don't know if that took place during the Last Supper or whatever.
Yes.
So then I understand the whole point of that story. That moment in the Catholic Church showed me that it was like an in-group, out-group thing.
Right.
Like if you weren't Catholic, you couldn't participate. And I found that as odd.
He's like, this is weird.
Yeah, but look, I mean, like if the point of your group, we'll say, is to like spread your faith and like accept everybody, which sounds like a core tenet in Jesus Christ. Creating that in-group, out-group thing seems strange, and it seems like counterproductive.
Right. But I guess I could see why they would do it, in the sense that it's specifically because of what it's for, right? It's less of an activity that everybody's doing, more so that anybody can participate in, and more so we do this in remembrance of Christ and what He did. And with that, if it's for you, if it's outside that scope, in the sense that that's not what you're doing it for, you're just doing it just to do it, it'd be almost pointless, right? In that sense. And I think that's why I could see it, but I definitely could see the awkwardness that would come in. Being in the
also, I was a kid, right?
Yeah,
and like,
100%.
Even if you look at it from the standpoint of like just cutting kids some slack, or like maybe you want to have the kid think favorably on your organization, right? You could just do it. And then I would have kept the line moving.
That'd be appeasing to the kid at that point. Because like, once again, I can see the awkwardness of it, and I can see why it's like, it's a little distasteful. But I think ultimately, if you're holding to your belief and truly kind of standing on business in regarers to what you guys believe.
Yeah, that guy stood on business for sure.
Yeah.
He was
I think it's like,
no new friends.
Get out of here. To this kid, you're like, all right, you can't take it, because it's just this is how we do things. You know what I mean? Ultimately. But to I guess to move forward with how you mentioned the Protestant church, right? Because it wasn't Catholic church,
right?
So the Protestant church that you ended up going to later on with your mom, that was actually the second part that I was going to get to. So it was perfect that you brought it up. Now, in regards to that, when y'all got there and how that whole process worked, prior to going there, what did you know about God? What did you know about the faith? And after or through the process and after you left there, did you come to know new things?
Yeah.
Or was it still that same mindset that you had coming in?
Yeah. So the first church that I mentioned we went to, the bigger one, I didn't learn much. I wasn't very engaged.
Okay.
I didn't understand why we were there. I picked up little pieces of it. When I joined the second church, the smaller one where I was part of like the youth group, I learned substantially more. So I think going into it, I had like a very basic framework of how it worked.
Right.
But I learned like what it meant to have, a relationship with Jesus Christ. And like I understood better like how to pray. I remember them teaching me like, you should always thank God for something,
Right.
well, everything really, before you ask for anything. And I thought that was an important lesson, not just for praying, just for like, speaking to loved ones, to like, really any aspect of your life. So I understand the utility of it, right? And so I did learn a lot, but it was also much more intimate. And I think like that was the intent
Right.
of churches
Right.
From the beginning, right? Is you can have these big grand churches. Like I literally just got back from Italy, and all the Catholic churches are just massive, beautiful,
Massive cathedrals.
and they're just incredible. Like you lose some of that like community when it's that big, right? Yeah, I mean, being part of that smaller church, of course, I was more involved with the pastor. I was more involved with the youth group. And it was like you just knew more people there.
And that's a common thing that I hear of, right?
Yeah.
It's a common thing that I hear in regards to the Catholic Church, where it's people grew up there, been going there all their lives. And what I've noticed is this same consistent message of it feeling empty, right? Almost like you're doing these duties just to do them. And then after you leave there, it's almost as if you're not even Catholic.
There's this cool
right?
concept, and I'm going to butcher it because I haven't read about it in a long time, but it's like, there's a certain amount of people that once your organization is over that amount of people, let's say it's 250 people. Once your organization is over 250 people, you start to lose like community cohesion.
Right.
And so there's actually a company named Gore-Tex that every single time they have a factory that grows to over that number, whatever it is, they'll just open another factory somewhere else and kind of split it.
Instead of hiring more people for the same.
At least that's what they did in the beginnings. And it was literally to keep that cohesion. And I don't remember how many people went to the smaller church, but it couldn't have been more than like 150 people. We ended up moving into like a bigger area, but I don't remember it being full, like that first church.
Where you said that you were able to receive more of this understanding and feel this tighter-knit community. You were talking about the second church, right?
I was talking about the second. I had a really weird experience, and I'm using the word weird here just because I can't think of a better acronym. Right. Not acronym, adjective. But I remember the pastor like more than once like kind of singled me out and said like, oh, you're special, God has a big plan for you, this, that, and the third. And I remember at the time that made me feel like really special. I was like, man, I don't know what's going on up there, but like for whatever reason I'm special.
Right.
I'm more special than all these other people who he's not talking to about that kind of thing. And which shows naivete, right? Like I was naive insofar as assuming that him talking to me didn't mean something similar for someone else in a different regard. But like I remember feeling special and wondering like, what is that special thing that God has in store for me? And as I got older, my mentality toward that shifted. My mentality toward human beings as a whole shifted. And I'm far more cynical now. You just gather evidence from seeing people do horrible things.
So what were you thinking that he was doing by saying that in the first place?
I think he was just being a nice guy and keeping a kid engaged. And I think that when you're a pastor, you're a leader. And when you're a leader, you have to inspire your people.
Yeah, inspire, motivate.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think he was just inspiring and motivating me. So,
because I do know that I've heard that before too, right? But in a different space. And I will say that not every pastor has told me that, or I haven't seen every pastor say that to others. And because what I would say is that it could be potentially from many things, right? It could be from quite literally whatever relationship he has with God, him being able to have that understanding or be able to see that in people, right? That this person specifically has something that they're going to do later on. Maybe and to glorify God. I think that was like part of his whole shtick, right? Like I remember during some of he called a sermon, some of his sermons, he like would be speaking in tongues. And I didn't understand tongues at the time. I kind of assumed it was just a thing that you eventually learn, like a language almost. And now I understand it to be something more like you're tapping into like a different plane of speech, kind of. So I will explain a little bit just to clarify things for those who watch and for you, because what Scripture says about it specifically and how it's used and when it's used in Scripture. So in Scripture, you don't necessarily see when they talk about people speaking in tongues, people speaking and saying things or making sounds that are not necessarily words or anything like that. But where we do see it on the day of Passover, where the disciples are gathered up together in a room and the Holy Spirit comes on them and they start speaking or prophesying. But when they're speaking, it's not coming out as them just saying anything or making sounds. They just happen to be speaking in such a way that everyone that was around, there was people surrounding the building and all these different, or in the town surrounding, wherever the case may be, where they could hear what was going on in this upper room. And all these people that were there were from different areas, different countries and such, and had different languages. So all these people started to hear these words in their own language. And they were like, whoa, this is next level, right? The fact that we're in this place that they only speak this one language, and probably multiple languages, but not the languages that we speak. You know, people from Ethiopia here, right? Obviously, no one in the city is potentially speaking Ethiopian unless they're from Ethiopia at the time, right? So they're hearing all these in their native tongue, right? And they're like, "Whoa, this is next level. This blew them away."
Yeah,
and that same day, right? 100%. And that being the most notable part in Scripture where you see speaking in tongues. Yeah. Right? So more so, less of what we see in a bunch of these churches around the world where they're speaking in tongues, but they're just making random sounds, saying random things. But more so, it was quite literally a way for God to communicate through you in a tongue that you don't even speak yourself. And so this is what we see as the real way, or at least the most notable way of speaking in tongues in Scripture.
I later heard that churches that regularly speak in tongues is kind of a red flag. It's one of those things that like it's not supposed to work that way. And so when I look back, learning that piece of information, and when I look back at like how a lot of the sermons went, it does seem like he was kind of putting on a show. And I don't think that was like a negative thing for him to do. I don't think he was trying to take advantage of anybody. I think it was, again, just the intent was to inspire. Right, so he did what he thought was right to inspire, or maybe he really believed it. I don't know. I haven't spoken to him since.
What I will say is that another way, because it just came to mind in regards to speaking in tongues, another way that speaking in tongues is noted in Scripture is also, say someone is speaking in some unknown language that other people, everyone in the congregation isn't able to pick up. In a sense, Paul later on in Scripture talks about being able to having someone that's able to interpret tongues. So if you're speaking in this language that no one else knows, obviously being able to have someone there to relay what you're saying in the first place, because what is the point of you speaking in tongues if no one there understands? And they're not receiving anything from what you're saying, right? It'd be almost pointless, right? So I think that's another place where we see it. But I could see why that'd be a red flag, right? And especially in the sense where he's already doing these things that you said. It seems like he's just trying to inspire. He's just trying to motivate, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but in the sense of what we're doing in church as ultimately
it's
being
dishonest, if nothing else,
in a sense, right?
And like I said, I don't hold any grudge against him. I think he was just doing his best with what he had. He had a relatively successful church, as far as I understand, and I don't have any ill will. In fact, at the time, I was inspired. I did think I was special, right? And I did think like, if I pray hard enough, I'll be able to speak tongues too.
How do you apply that once you've thought that you were special? How did you?
I don't know. I guess I just was listening more. Okay. You know, I was like trying to find an experience, or I was just like listening to the world to see if there was somewhere that I could like kind of make my mark, as it were. Right. And that's something that people kind of do anyway when they're young, right? You're trying to figure out who you want to be and where you want to go and stuff.
And in this sense, you just got inspired, right?
And that's it. It was just somebody just told me I'm special and I'm going to do cool stuff. And to be honest, like my family's been telling me stuff like that my whole life. So like this guy was just kind of. What was surreal about it wasn't that he was saying it to me; it's that he was a total stranger and didn't know me.
Came out of nowhere and told this,
and like was looking me in the eyes and telling me like, "You're special. I can see it. Like you're going to do great things." Because that was like validating. I'm like, here's a stranger,
100%.
You know, telling me the same thing that my family's telling me. And like, you know, for lack of a better term, I'm a bit of like the golden child. I just like. I don't know. I've been doing pretty well my whole life, and so my family sees me as just like a good example of success, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know. I think over the years, like the Christian element of it, saying that like specifically God has this great plan for me, has just faded away.
Right.
And
it's 'cause you
but I still believe, but I still believe that like maybe I'm good at emotional regulation. So like at work, I'm a supervisor, right? And it's typical for guys to get frustrated, and it's typical for maybe fights to break out or something like that. Thankfully, that doesn't happen. Anyway, they like I know that I'm emotionally mature enough to be able to navigate those situations calmly. in which case I can help these guys kind of vent a little bit and kind of get back on track. And I think that's hugely valuable. It's also good for men and their mental health, because we might not have enough outlets to talk to each other and to get those feelings out in a constructive way, right?
Right.
So I do think there's things that I'm good at by comparison to the average man, but I don't see that as like there's a larger like plan, and I'm like Gabriel in this larger plan. You know what I mean? Like I don't view it that way.
So it's very interesting that once you, like you said, this is a stranger, telling you the same thing that your family's been telling you this whole time. And I almost want to say that I could see how that might have weight to it because of that, right? Yeah, but also compelling. There's things that you tend to notice as you talk to people and as you figure out who they are and how they are, that you could see the potential in them, right? Even if it's just the physical potential that you could see, you could tend to see that potential. Now, what I will say is that I've had an experience that was similar but different in the sense that this is part of my testimony, ultimately what brought me to actually start seeking Christ. I did grow up in church initially when I was younger, and I was never one to actually want to keep going. It was more so we was made to go on Sundays, and I didn't necessarily want to go. I mean, I would have rather sleep in the car, sit in the car, just do anything in the car instead of going inside. We literally went all the way to church, and I'm like, yeah, Mom, I'll stay in the car. It's all good. I'll stay in here. She's like, no, we're going inside. And I'm like, oh man. So it's me and my older brother, and we have to go, right? But there was plenty of times I either rather wanted to stay home, stay in the car, anything else but go inside. And I think it was very interesting that was the case growing up, and then leading up to when I go off to college, doing my own thing and all that. So sometime while I was off in college, I went to Daytona Beach. So I was in Embry-Riddle in Daytona Beach, right? So when I was out there, at some point, I think it was just prior to COVID, my dad was I don't know what event or one random time he was having church. He lives down there as well. He was going to some church with this pastor that was considering himself a prophet in some sense, right? And so it was interesting. I never experienced personally someone that was considering themselves to be a prophet that was preaching and giving a message or sermon for the day. So he invited me one day, and I went. So me and my ex went, and as we're there, they do something where they're like, more than not just like offering and such, but they're like, sow a seed, right? So and this for me is a red flag, right? Because I've seen it plenty of times on TV, on a bunch of different things, this prosperity preaching, right? Where you're telling them, all you gotta do is give $1, you'll get $10. You get this, you get that, whatever the case is, right? As if God's just gonna just magically bless you now because you're giving money to them, and this whole thing, right? And this is some of the things that I come to definitely have a high dislike for, right? Because it puts a bad image on what God's trying to do through us, right? And so because you did mention tithe, and I was going to tap into it a little bit later, but I guess I'll tap into it now because it ties in a little bit before I get into the sow a seed part in regards to tithing, right? So in the Old Testament, they would had to bring pretty much 10% of everything they had. So whatever the crops that they had grown up, or whether it be the flock or the calves, whatever they may have had, they had to tithe 10% of that, right? So that was a thing at that point in the Old Testament under different laws, right? And in the New Testament, we still have this understanding of tithing in the sense of out of the increase that God's blessed us with, blessing others, right? Ultimately, right? Even outside of church, not just necessarily in the church, but outside church as well. Now, I still do tithe or give money in church, but it's more so for the building up of the church, for the upkeep of the church, right? More so like less than, I'm trying to put, thousands of dollars in the pocket of the pastor or anything like that, right? It's more so for the upkeep of church because it's a place that we're coming together to worship God. Yeah. And so that's how, if anything, how it should be. Right? You've mentioned in your story how your mom was giving money to church and you was wondering why, especially when you wasn't able to pay for certain stuff, or you'd rather a toy instead of her giving money to church to pay for that. Ultimately, that's where I guess it comes in, where it's like less of, if the pastor's asking for money just to ask for money, you know what I mean? On some, I need a private jet. You see what I'm saying? Because there's pastors that do it. Yeah, pastors that do it. Obviously, that's not what we're called to do. That's not okay, right? Ultimately. But to get back to this, and I just want to clear up that in regards to tithing. Now, to get back into this prophet or guy that was claiming to be a prophet, he was saying sow a seed. So this is even worse than just, ask people money for a private jet. He's now like, look at my Louis Vuitton bag. Look, quite literally. Pulled out his Louis Vuitton bag. Look what I was able to do through God. God got me this Louis Vuitton bag, right? So guys, if you want to get this too, if you want to get to this point where you could get a Louis Vuitton bag as well, you know what I mean? All you got to do is, really sow into God, really sow seeds, really do this, that, and third. So this is just terrible. And I'm just like, you know what? I have the extra money. I don't mind. I don't care right now. It's not like I was really seeking God at the time. So I'm like, Yeah, see what happens. You know what I mean? Never been in this situation. You know what I mean? Personally, I was like, all right, let's see. We'll do it. Right. So I think I went up there and I was like, I'll associate $100. I'm going all in on this one. Right. Let's make it happen. Right. And then so my dad did as well. He was like, look, I'm doing it too. I'm going to join you. Let's do it. You know what I mean? So we both go up. And what he was doing is he wasn't just sowing a seed and that was it. It was more so you sow the seed. And then after you sow the seed, you'll walk up when it's your turn in line. He'll prophesy over you, whatever it may be in regards to your life, right? So my dad goes up first. He talking to my dad, and he's like, yeah, well, your family's going to be good. Finances, is going to be coming in where you're going to be well off, such and such. And he's telling him all these different things. And now I'm wondering, second in line, I'm like, what is he going to tell me? Is he going to tell me the same thing? Is he going to tell me something different? Is he going to tell me something that's relevant to me? Do
you think he was aware that you were that man's son?
Yes, I think he knew. I think he knew because I think my dad told him that we were. This is like a smaller church, but not super small, but like small enough, right? So I guess it was more of an intimate thing where almost everybody knew everybody in a sense, and obviously they would know that I stood out, that I wasn't there initially. But I think he's been going to the church for a while as well, so I think he passed on that message. So and so that's exactly what I was about to say in regards to, is he going to be like a psychic where he's like, oh, this is what's going on in your life and this, then the third, and this is where you get better it, or this is what the problems are, or whatever, or this is what's to come, right? So he gets to me finally, and I'm like, all right, let's do it. Let's see what I'm about to hear. So he tells me something along the lines of,
you're eventually going to have a podcast. You're like,
yo, look. And I was like, sold.
Let me go buy the game right now.
Right now. So he tells me financially some good things. I don't remember exactly. He just pretty much said your finances will be good, something along those lines, right? But that wasn't the significant part. The second significant part was the second part, and it was where he starts pointing out. He said, I don't know what it is, but you have this hedge of fire around you. This hedge of fire that I would say is like protecting you against a witchcraft or spiritual wickedness or just anything that's trying to come against you right now and just continuously, I guess. And so in that space, I'm like, okay, that's
I don't like witches.
I'm not seeking God, but look, if I'm protected,
100%.
Whatever else may be trying to be out to get me, I'm down. You know what I mean? No problem, right? So I appreciate it. So it definitely hit in, just like in your situation in regards to you probably being like, oh yeah, like this is it, right? Like feeling special.
I'm the guy.
Exactly how it felt. Like. Especially since I'm not moving in any ways good, right? And I would say in the eyes of God in hindsight at that time. But I will say that I definitely felt like, if I'm moving how I'm moving, but he still protected me in some way, shape, or form,
that's a fat win.
I'll take it. Exactly. That's exactly what you're saying. So from that, fast forward to when I eventually made my way back up to Jersey. And I'm back in Jersey. I think, it was around COVID time. And, I think aviation wise, I was thinking, do I want to go back in aviation? Cause I started working aviation down there. I was working at AOG, working on Cessnas and ATHEIST'S and such. So just general aviation stuff. And when I got up here, I'm like, COVID's happening. Do I want to try to go back into aviation? Is it even going to be possible to do right now when things are just hectic? Or should I just try to find something else that's like easier to get into that I can still make good money? And so I went that route. I kind of went into Amazon delivery. So I just I never did something else similar to that. So I was like, I'll try it out. And I did. And it was relatively good in regards to pay wise at that time and in regards to having the freedom because you were kind of out there, could be on your phone, could do whatever you wanted to do. So with that, me being able to be on my phone, me being able to listen to whatever I wanted. I was listening to a bunch of things, right? A lot of things. I wasn't seeing God at the time. Once again, I started listening to, or I guess to set the basis. At that same time, I was in the middle of moving out of my parents' house since I just moved out from my apartment down there in Daytona Beach, coming back up here. It's not like I had a spot waiting for me other than my parents' house.
I did that same thing, dude. I get it.
So I go there, and now, since I'm moving out now, and I moved in with my girlfriend, my girlfriend at the time, she's living in Trenton, right? So, and she's living in like the hood area of Trenton, right? So, and she's there by herself. So now it's just me and her in this hood area. I grew up, let's say, in the suburbs, right? So to speak, right? 100%. Okay. So the only time that I've seen and been in the midst of this hood activity is when I used to go out into Temple or to any of these parties out here in Philly when I used to go to AIM to get my license to fix planes. This is when I was out here actually in the midst of these hood activities. But I never laid my head and literally just been in the midst as often and as in depth as I was when I was living in Trenton. First night I slept over, there was a drive-by in the back. That in the back of her building was a drive-by where 2 kids got shot. And that was pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's opening.
First night you're sleeping there, and to be woken up to that, right? That was what we woke up to, gunshots. right in the back. And it was very close because the back window was right in the bedroom. So this is all you hear. And you're just like, whoa, what just happened? Come to find out it was 2 kids that got shot. I believe they made it. Thank God. But I think it was definitely one of those situations that I'm like, all right, well, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Right now, amidst that same time, my wife's going through, we're dealing with this whole thing where she had whatever problem she had or people that she had to deal with at the time while I'm coming into this situation.
Just like all hood politics.
Right. So yeah, and it's relationships that she had with people, but also people that didn't like her, people that did like her, whatever the case may be. While it's also, we dated before I went to Daytona Beach, and this is me returning. Whilst she's telling people that I'm, me returning means that me and her are getting back together type of situation. So now there's this thing now that I got to deal with. I got to now figure out a way to make sure I can protect, right? Me and my girlfriend, right? And then later on, me and my family, right? So now this is where my mindset is. I'm in this state of despair low key because I'm trying to figure out how do I protect us? And because I've dealt with situations that got a little close to what I was dealing with at that moment in Daytona Beach, like near the end of me moving back, that got a little sketchy because of other people as well. It wasn't even anything that was tied directly to me, but I ended up being part of it because of these other people. And with that, now in this space, that same, almost like PTSD of those same situations, but now I'm in the middle of it all.
Yeah.
Right? It's not like I'm like on the side of this situation and just coming in here every now and then.
Visiting.
Him quite literally sleep in my head, laying my head in this place that I'm going to have to deal with these things. And I'm the man. The relationships, usually you're the one that have to protect you. You're the one that have to do all these different things. So now, once again, I'm in the state of despair trying to figure out how do I protect us. I'm like, because if I'm fighting one-on-one with somebody, I could probably win a fight like that, right? If I have to fight, let's say, let's skip ahead. If I could fight like 5 people for my life, I could potentially do it for my life and my wife or girlfriend, right? When it came down to it, I'm like, if you add more people, if those people that are in that 5 people are a little more skilled in their capabilities, if someone has a
you're
knife,
getting got
if someone has a
week.
100%. And the more and more I thought about it, it don't matter even if I had a knife myself, what if they had a knife? What if it was 2 people with knives, right? Now your odds get lower and lower of winning that fight, right? So now if you add a gun into, say I get a gun, sure, I can protect us with a gun. But then what if they have a gun too? It's who shoots first, right? Or say they have a better gun. Then I may still lose even if I shoot first,
Could
right?
be.
Say it's 2 people with a gun. Now you see what the problem that you continue to run into no matter how high up you get in regards to how you try to protect yourself,
right,
weapon-wise, you're eventually potentially going to lose, right? Even if you were to have a government or entity of
some
empire on your side, right? Pretty much just a group of people on your side. Every empire at some point has failed, right? So with that understanding, no matter how high up I got in the thoughts of protecting ourselves, there's some way, shape, or form I could still lose this whole battle. Right?
Yeah.
And so the more I thought of that, I'm just like, whoa, like, what am I going to do? So that was just to tie in what happened as I'm listening to some of the things I was listening to while I was doing Amazon. So this is the state of mind that I'm in at the time. So as I'm listening to some things, I kind of get into Greek mythology. For some reason, I was always interested in it. So I was like, all right, let me see what's going on.
It's fun to learn about for sure.
100%. And I came across this channel. I would have to find the name of it. I'll probably pop it up on the video for those who want to see the channel. But pretty much he gives a lot of stories. He pretty much reads a lot of stories out in regards to Greek mythology, other religions, and even the Bible, right? Where he reads out some of the stories. I'm not sure what standpoint he's coming from, but he's just almost unbiased.
Just information.
Just reading it 100%. Yeah. And so I'm coming across this information about Zeus, about all these other gods in the Greek pantheon. And I'm just like, wow, these are supposed to be gods, right? But you see Zeus trying to sleep with his daughters, trying to sleep with his nieces. You see Hades trying to take his niece.
Crazy stories.
It gets real, right? And the more I started to look into it, I'm like, these almost just sound like humans with some extra
powers.
Power.
Yeah,
100%.
Well, I think that is the point of Zeus. Zeus was a human who defeated, what are they called? The Titans. His father was a Titan.
Right.
So he was a human that was like ascended to the level of God of all gods. So I think that is kind of written into Greek mythology, but sorry for derailing you.
No, but that was good though. I definitely didn't know some of those things, and that's exactly why I appreciate that. So it was because that was what I was thinking. I'm like, this seems human, like, right? The way
I read the Iliad and I was like, what is happening in this?
It just
wild.
It was all over the place, and I'm like, what is going on here? So as I'm listening to that, but once again, there's something interesting to listen to, especially while you're just delivering packages every day. Is you're doing the same thing all day, but being able to stretch your legs, being able to kind of just enjoy this time of kind of being by yourself, but not at the same time. Because you're interacting with people here and there as well, like when people answer the door, when people come out. But at the same time, most of the time, you're just locked in, listen, got your headphones in, you're just doing whatever you're doing. And so I'm enjoying just at least listening to some things. But I did noticed those things as I was listening to it. So eventually on the same channel, I get into Bible stories, right? And I'm like, all right, this is interesting. You know, these Bible stories about, you know, different people, whether it be Abraham, whether it be Job. But those two stories are some of the stories that stood out and how it connects once again to that.
Specifically Abraham and Job?
Specifically Abraham and Job. And there's a reason. So the reason that Abraham's story stood out to me, for example, remember, I'm in this state of despair, thinking, how do I protect myself? And such and such. And I'm like, I'm never gonna be Superman. I'm not gonna be bulletproof. I'm never gonna get bitten by a radioactive spider and turn into Spider-Man, right? It's not gonna happen. Right?
Is that what happened to Abraham?
No.
I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I know a surprising amount about
100%. And that's exactly, we're about to get into just a little bit about him to kind of tie it into what I'm saying in regards to what the prophet had said. So with that in mind, I'm like, I need something higher than myself. I need something better than a gun, better than even a group of people, a gang, right? I need something better than that, right? Something that's truly going to protect roundabout at all times, right? And so I came across the story of Abraham and some Bible stories about him, and it got into, let's say, him and Sarah, his wife, and when they first entered into one of the cities, or one of the Gentile cities. At least they believed it was Gentile at first, in the sense that they didn't believe.
Remind me what Gentile means?
In the sense they're pretty much non-Israelites.
Got it.
Right.
Okay.
So in a sense they probably were, well, which obviously at the time Abraham wasn't necessarily an Israelite because it wasn't a thing long, right?
I think in the context of the Bible, it's like a follower of God. The Jews are there's Jews and then there's Gentiles. So it's anybody who doesn't follow God.
Right, and that's exactly why I mentioned it, right? Because he's thinking that these people don't know God, that they're going to kind of move in whatever way they're going to move based on not knowing God. So with that, he enters this town and, you know, he has to deal with, he's like, I'm coming in here. I have a beautiful wife. And he points that out. He said, you're beautiful. And because of that, the people here might want to kill me to take you, right? Because you got to imagine the type of times that they're living in, these ancient days.
Rough times.
Right, very rough times, right? Especially if a ruler takes a liking to your wife, you can only imagine.
That's that, dude. They own your wife as far as they're concerned.
They're taking you out with no problem, and then, you know, they're good, right? So with that in mind, he's like, just tell them you're my sister. Right? Instead, don't tell them that, you know, we're married. Just tell them you're my sister, and we should be good to go. All right? So he does that. That's exactly what happens. You know, people come across her. That's my brother. And, yeah, that's my sister. Whatever the case may be. Now, the ruler, or the people that worked under the ruler, said that, oh, you know, she looks beautiful. We're definitely going to introduce her. You know what I mean? Like, she's looking right. So let me introduce her to my. I
wish that was in the Bible.
Sometimes I like to go exactly there when I'm speaking on certain things.
Yeah.
So pretty much she's like, yeah, she's looking right. Let's introduce her to homeboy. Right? So then she tells him, like, tells the ruler, you know, I got this girl out here. She's looking right. She got a brother with her. What's up? And he's like, all right, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to get to know her. Let's see what's up. So he goes into this whole process of pretty much courting her. Like he starts to buy her stuff, get her stuff, starts to take care of her for real. Right? And then same thing for the brother. He's like, oh, this is your brother? I'm gonna take care of him too, right? He's trying to have a little liking for the brother. Brother like, oh, this is a good guy, you know? Right? And this is the type of space he's trying to get into. Now,
wild.
What ends up happening is he takes such a liking to her that he's like, oh, I'm ready to lay it down. Right? And around that same time, does God give him a dream that like one of the nights that he's thinking of this, I guess. And God gives him a dream, and in his dream, God's like, yeah, you better not touch her. Pretty much. I'm paraphrasing with this whole thing, but he pretty much tells him, yeah, don't touch her. If you touch her, actually, we're gonna have problems. You know what I mean? Like big problems.
I'm not trying to throw hands with God if anybody.
And he's like, what do you mean you're gonna have problems? He's like, I didn't even know that was his sister. I mean, his wife. I thought it was his sister. Yeah. He told me it was his sister.
Yep.
How am I at fault for this? And he said, that's exactly why I didn't make you touch her. That's exactly why I didn't allow you to touch her. Because I know that you didn't know. And now I'm informing you. So you do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, if anything, send them away. Give them some gifts to go and leave it be.
That'll be that.
And everything will be good. Right? So, he did exactly that. But when he did approach Abraham, or when Abraham approached him after the fact, he's like, why'd you even have to lie to me? Like, why'd you lie to me? He said, look, I only lied to you guys because I thought you guys don't know God. So, I didn't want you guys to kill me, so this is why we lied to you, right? So, okay, you move on. And you're like, all right, maybe Abraham's not going to do this again. He does it right after that. In the next town that he goes to, he does the same exact thing, right? Mind you, this man's obviously, I mean, he's lying, but not lying at the same time, because this is his half-sister, technically, because at that time, they were able to, let's say, marry their half-sister or their cousin or whatever the case is, right? So in this situation, this is his half-sister, technically.
Sounds like Greek mythology, doesn't it?
What they were doing, right? So he's like, once again, this is my sister. It's not my wife, it's my sister, whatever the case is. Same thing. Next ruler, same situation. He's taking a liking to her and all this different stuff. And now, once again, God gives. I think in this situation, they started to have problems already, right? And now this ruler gets the dream, and now he's like, snap, I didn't know, same situation. Why didn't he tell me? Whatever the case may be. This is why.
So God appealed to them directly?
In a dream, yes.
In a dream. And they understood it to be like the
they
King of Kings. So like, in principle, they should have converted in that moment.
Well, in a sense that they knew that this was a divine being in some way, shape, or form. I don't know if they necessarily knew it was
I'm tracking.
God
Okay.
of the universe, the one who brought this to existence type of situation, but they did know this is someone that has authority, right? In a sense, I should adhere to what he's saying, because if you came to me in my dream to address a situation that I'm currently dealing with, you may have some knowledge on you to be telling me what I'm, or authority to tell me to not do certain things, right? So I can only assume that that would be the case because the way that they reacted after the fact, right? They are rulers, but yet they're like, I'm going to submit to what you just told me, and I'm going to say, all right, you're good to go. Here's some stuff. Same situation, but he said, let Abraham go, tell him to pray for you, and everything else will be, come back together, be healed, whatever the case may have been. Whatever ended up messing up in his town because of Abraham and his sister, and him taking a liking to his wife. Right. So this ends up taking place, similar idea, right? And so through these both of these stories, what you see is this almost divine protection, right? So Abraham is not doing anything to protect himself other than lying about his wife being his sister and just his sister instead of his wife, right? And whilst God is doing the work in the background, where he's fixing such a situation where Abraham is not being touched. In a sense, no one's going, oh, you lied to me, now I'm going to kill you. Or, oh, this is your sister, I don't care, I'm going to kill you and take her, right? Or this is your wife, you know what I mean? None of those situations happen, and you could see this constant protection from God in the background in ways that Abraham didn't even have to pick up a sword to threaten anyone, right? And ultimately, if anything, they ended up sending him away with stuff in his pocket, right? And his wife as well.
Yeah, this reminds me of the Book of Eli, at least you saw that movie?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so just to reiterate real quick, it's basically Denzel Washington plays Eli, who is on this like pilgrimage to bring seemingly the last Bible somewhere. And he doesn't know where, but he's just going on faith. And he gets into a couple gunfights, this, that, and the third. And I'm not going to ruin the movie, but the short version is like, it's clear that he has some type of divine protection.
Right. And that's exactly what I'm trying to tie in here, because that's exactly what I started thinking about at that time. With this level of despair, having this idea and understanding, wait, there's some protection in here. And like, mind you, I grew up hearing about this God, but I didn't know truly what he offered. I didn't know what he brought forth as you come to know him, and what that meant, right? And this is just opening my eyes to some of the things that he does for those who believe on him, right? And so I'm like, all right, this is interesting. It's not like I'm sold yet, but I'm kind of like, whoa, like this is something. There's something here. And I've heard of this God before. Yeah. Right? Those other gods I've heard of in passing, but I didn't know to be true. If anything, I've heard of them as myth, right? Most of the time, it was never like, oh, these are solid people to believe in, right? It was most of the time, it was like, this is a myth. And when it came to Christianity, it came to the God of the Bible, it was more so, this is true. Though there be people that said otherwise, it was most of the time it was claimed that this is true, less of a myth, right? So I was like, all right, there may be some validity here versus the Greek mythology I was just listening to. And then seeing that level of protection, I'm like, whoa. So now it deepens, because this is where it gets very direct in regards to the prophecy that this guy says, which in hindsight, I really think that he was just, he was definitely scamming people out there.
Saying vague stuff that could be.
I honestly believe. I just think that personally, I think that God used him to still give me a message or give me an understanding in some sense because of where it led to in this story where I'm going right now, right? So, because what ends up happening is I come across the next story, which is the story of Job. And this kind of gets into, I was just listening to something earlier in regards to how it tied into suffering in the world with the loving God being at the helm. The reason it got into, I don't know if you know the story of Job.
But
okay, so I'm gonna get into it a little bit right here. I'm trying to, give a Spark Notes version just for everyone watching, so it's not, super long, but to get into his story, it was more so this guy that had everything. I mean, he was quite literally the richest guy in the East at this time, right? So he had absolutely everything you could want. He had all the kids he could want. He had all the crops and everything, all the flock and the cattle that he could need, right? So he was a rich man, right? And had everything in need of nothing, ultimately. And so at this time, even God himself considered him a righteous man amongst the world at this time, right? So in this space, there's an assembly in heaven, right? All the angels are getting together, all the sons of God are getting together, and Satan or the accuser, right? Some people like this call him the devil, but He could have just been an accuser in the heavenly court, right? In a sense, he comes to God and, God's like, have you considered my servant Job? He's righteous amongst, the world right now. And, the accuser's like, oh, yeah, I've seen him. I considered him, trying to accuse him of stuff, but ultimately, I honestly think the only reason that he even worships you or really leads into you is because you got this hedge of fire around him. And now this is where, once I heard hedge of fire,
like, oh shit.
I was like, wait a second, what is this hedge of fire you're talking about? This is the first time I think I really, even though I grew up in church, I don't even think I really came across the story of Job, or read it myself, I should say.
Yeah.
Right? And at this time, hearing full Bible stories for the first time. I've heard them before, but not in its fullness, in this way that I'm listening to it now, or at that time. So I'm like, whoa, like this hedge of fire, like where are you going with this, right? So he goes, yeah, you got this hedge of fire in him. That's the only reason he's protected from all these different things. So that's the only reason that he is worshiping you and the reason he looks to you, right? And mind you, initially, this guy says, the prophet, right, or the false prophet, whatever he was, ends up saying, you have this hedge of fire that's protecting you against witchcraft and stuff like that. But the way that they're using this hedge of fire in this scripture is more so, you're not just protected against spiritual things, but quite literally physical things, everything that that could be used to hinder you in these different ways, right? And I'm like, okay, whoa, so this is the level of protection I'm actually looking for, the type of protection that I'm like, oh, maybe this is, a net positive. This is something that I could lean into and potentially see, come to fruition in my life. So, but once again, getting a little ahead of myself, because this is not 100% my thought at this time. I'm just like, whoa, this is interesting, and this is kind of protection of what I was thinking of. So what ends up happening for Job is after this accuser says this to God, God goes, okay, so, pretty much, here it is. I'll remove the hedge of fire, right, to see if that claim that you're making, the accusation you're bringing against him is true. Remove the hedge of fire, right? And you'll, in a sense, be able to go and, or the things that are going great in his life will be able to pretty much come to a nod. No longer be going great. Things will start to fall apart around him. And the only thing you can't touch is him. Don't touch him. Don't touch his life. None of that. Like, everything around him, sure, right? So now we see in his story that everything starts to fall apart. I mean, quite literally, same day, probably same couple moments. One servant comes to him and tells him, hey, Joe, by the way, your flock and calves, they got eaten up by a gang of wolves, right? So they're no more, right?
Gang.
That's it, right? So then he tells him, well, there's another servant comes right after that guy, and he's like, yeah, Job, I need to tell you this, but I know it's not gonna be, you're not probably gonna take it very well. Look, your cattle, they got stolen away by these group of bandits or individuals, whoever it may have been. They stole it away. So in a sense, now at this point, his wealth is
plummeting.
It's out of there, right? Because this is all his stuff, right? All these cattle, all this flock is what was his money.
This is his wealth.
This is his wealth,
yeah.
Right? So now that that's gone, what else do you think they could take from him? You're like, they already took his wealth. What else is left? His kids. So his kids are in the house. They're visiting their eldest brother. I think it's like 3 or 4 of them. And then there's some storm that happens. The house ends up falling down. Everyone in the house ends up dying, right? So all the kids gone, right? So now you're like, what? So now everything is falling apart to such an extent that anyone in his position will be grieving and mourning on another level.
Yeah.
Right? Especially receiving all this information all in the same day. At least some people, and it still is going to hit similarly, but at least some people, when you're well off and you're wealthy and your kids pass away, it's going to hurt, but at least you have something to cushion you and fall back on. Right? You're like, at least I'm still good. I'm living good still, right? But that hurts, but at least he doesn't even have that to fall back on. His wealth is gone. His kids are gone. Now he's just, what am I supposed to do? And in the midst of that, in the moment, he just continues to call out to God. He continues to praise God. He continues to look to God. And so now, one may be scratching their head and go, well, it doesn't even make sense, right? But it's not even done yet. So the accuser comes back to God and he's like, so, yeah, I know he didn't curse you or turn away from you or anything like that, but this is why. This is the only reason he didn't do it. His flesh. You touch a man's flesh, he'll curse you to your face, right? So, you really want to see him curse you to your face? You really want to see him come against you? Touch his flesh. Touch his health, right? And so, God's like, yeah, all right, so you can touch his flesh. You can touch his health. Just don't kill him. You just can't kill him, but you can touch his flesh, his health, whatever it may be. And so we see that come to fruition. We see Job get boils all over his skin. I'm talking head to toe. I'm talking literally you can't walk and be comfortable. You can't lay and be comfortable. The only relief Scripture says that he was able to get is by breaking pottery and just scraping his skin. This is the only relief he is able to get at this time, right? So he's hurting. He's going through some things. He's going through these things, and he's just, his wife now, right? She was able to experience all those other things with him. She also lost wealth, right? Because this is his wealth, but she's married to him. Right. This is their wealth, right? She obviously had kids with him. He lost kids. She also lost kids, right? So both of them are being able to mourn together, grieve together in regards to those things, right? Now, the problem is when it comes to this, and this is why I guess people believe that, she said this, but when it comes to this, she wasn't able to join him in this endeavor. She wasn't able to go through the pain and hardship that he's dealing with currently with his flesh, with his health, right? So she ends up telling him one day, while he's sitting there probably scraping his skin with this broken pottery, how about this, Job, just curse God and die. Just curse God and let him kill you. So at least you'll have relief in death, right? Just curse God and let him kill you. And he says, in a sense, to paraphrase, woman, how dare you? Right? You sound as the Gentile woman by saying something like that. Why would I curse God and die? He said, is God not able to give and take away? Right? We have this understanding that he does give us stuff. He's blessed us in a mighty way in this life and all that we have now. But also, is he not God? Is he not able to take away if he will to take away? Right? And should we not accept, if we're accepting the good that he's able to give us, are we not to accept the things that he's taking away in our lives? Right? So he's explaining this to her a little bit. And you would think, okay, Job still sounds like he's locked in. He still sounds like he ain't got no problems. Now, I will tell you that it doesn't pop up again that the Satan comes to God again and says anything about, Job turning against him anymore. But some people do come, and it's his friends, right? So you see where Job's still standing. He's still standing on business, still trusting God with this. But he still feels that he's going through some things right now. More than
he's going through it for sure.
Right, 100%. And what we see is three friends enter into the story. And these three friends, as I've came across recently, some believe was more so what their explanations for what was taking place was more so how the ancients would have looked at what type of things he was going through at the time. So all this hardship he was going through, they kind of would have looked at it in, let's say, the first friend. He was saying, oh, well, what did you do? You must have done something to make God allow all these things to happen in your life, or to make God do all these things to you in your life, right? You must have done something. And Job's trying to explain to him, I've done nothing wrong. I'm an innocent man, right? I've walked in the ways I'm supposed to walk. I've done the stuff I'm supposed to do. I mean, quite literally, God calls him righteous, right? So he's locked in. He's doing what he should do. And we see that the friend is, kind of locked in on that idea or understanding that it's because you did something, right? And then and that, once again, would be one of the worldviews or that the ancients had at the time, that
right.
you doing bad things is what
just like they bless, they also curse.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what you're thinking, that because of the bad things that you did, it led to these bad things happening to you now. Right? So that was one of the friends that approached him. Now, the next friend is saying something similar, but more so, he's saying, because you think you're righteous, because you think you're all that in a bag of chips, I need to humble you. And that's why you're going through the stuff that you're going through now. Right? And so, this being another ancient worldview with the
These are some friends.
Yeah, right. While he's
wild,
kick him while he's down.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's
so
crazy.
He's pretty much, they're saying all these different things while he's struggling already and going through these hardships, not uplifting him, not helping and motivating him in any way, shape, or form, but coming against him with railing accusations. Right. So now the third friend, or if I can't remember what third friend said, there was a fourth friend that pops up later on. And this fourth friend, because I don't remember the third friend specifically what he said, but the fourth friend, he came to almost seeming as if he was on Job's side. He's like, man, this right here is that guy. He is locked in. He is a righteous man, truly. But where he starts to throw him down and kick him while he's down is he comes in and says, no, but because you're righteous, God he's trying to build you up. And that's why he's allowing you to go through these things. Because you're a good guy, because you're locked in, he's trying to chain you up, tear you down, just so that you can be nice and strong and built up after this. And you could be good to go. Right? And Job's like, man, y'all knew me all my life. And you're calling all types of stuff on me, saying that this is that and the third is why this is happening to me. But you guys know me. We are friends, right? We are close knit. Why is this such a struggle for you to figure out that I am doing right and I am upright before God, and this shouldn't be happening to me, right? So this is the kind of space that he's getting into. Now he's starting to doubt things. Now he's starting to ask, wait a second, does God think that I am in the wrong and that's why he's allowing these things to happen to me? Is it because he's trying to prune me? Is it because he's trying to humble me? What is going on? And so now he starts to talk to God, right? Say we put the friends aside, say they left, whatever it may have been, but they get out of the picture. And at this point, he's now questioning God. He's like, God, if I could talk to you right now, if I could stand before you right now and plead my case before your throne, I'll plead my case and I'll leave innocent, right? Because I know I'm innocent. And pretty much he's like, God, let that court date happen right now. You know what I mean? In a sense. And this is where he's kind of going with everything at this time. He's not cursing God necessarily yet, but he's definitely doubting God's ability to judge and God's ability to allow this, determine who has certain things happen in their lives and who doesn't. And so now in this place of questioning at the end of the story, because this is where we're getting to right now, God actually responds to him eventually, right? Here's where, he starts to, see what God has to say. First thing that God says, which is one of my favorite parts of Scripture, it's honestly one of the most gangster things I ever heard God say in Scripture. And he says, especially with somebody that's kind of, it's not like he said one sentence, God, if I could have my day in court before you. He was going on and on and on about this similar topic, and like, God, I'm innocent. I could prove this to you. Like he's really trying to plead his case, right? And to see God respond to him and how he responds to him. Initially, the starting of it was really pretty gangster to me. He says, Job, gird up yourself like a man and be prepared to answer these questions. So I'm just sitting there like, mind you, you're thinking somebody's just complaining and somebody's saying all this, then the third, and somebody's just ready talking when someone's not like in front of your face. Right? But when somebody confronts you now and they're like, you had a lot to say. Yo, gird up yourself like a man. I got some stuff to say. I got some questions to ask you, right? Be ready to make an answer because there's plenty of answers and plenty of things that you want to say. So be ready to answer the questions I got for you right now then. He said, well, all right, go ahead. Right, so God goes, so Job, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? And what measuring tools did I use to set the earth on the foundation the way that it is? And he said, if you can answer this question, you're righteous. You can justify yourself, right? Because you're that guy, in a sense, right? And Job, of course, has no answer.
Yeah, I wasn't around, dude.
I don't know where I was. Like, and I definitely don't know how you laid the foundations and what tools you used to do so. And so he's like, all right, okay, let's move on. What did I hang the clouds in the sky on? What is it hung on? And what measuring tools or what rope tool did I use to align the clouds in the way that it sits in the sky? Right. And once again, this is something that Job wouldn't know, or especially at that time. So he's like, all right. So we move on to, I think, the third one. And it's more so on the fact of, do you give lions their food in their due season? Are you there at the birth of a deer when a deer is finally born and when they need to pretty much be able to learn how to walk and do this whole process, right? He starts to talk about the processes that you see in the nature. Right? He says, how does rain fall from the sky? He starts to ask them these questions that we see in creation itself, in nature, right? And obviously most of this stuff he's not able to answer. And I think at some point he actually responds and says, God, I'm just going to cover my mouth. I'm just not going to say anything. I'm going to let you talk because it seems like you know what you're talking about, and clearly I don't, right? So let me hear you out, right? So go ahead and speak, right? And God continues, and he's pretty much laying out these things that he pretty much has a hand on, the things that he is sovereign over, right? Where he's like, crows, for example, don't store up their food in a nest, but instead they go out and eat every day, right? So with that, he's like, in a sense, he's pointing out how he feeds the crows every day. They can go out and they will get food because I feed them. Right? He points out the sparrows. He points out these different animals and how they're able to function. They're able to get, when the lion is hungry, who provides the food for the lion to eat in the first place, right? The animals that he goes out and hunts down, who provides them in their due season when they're necessary to be fed in a certain way. He's pointing out all these different concepts and how these work in nature and how he has a hand on all these different things in their due season, in their moment when they need to be dealt with. And so Job's just sitting there like, all right, you're not wrong. You do this, right? So then we get into the last two things that he points out. He points out Behemoth. It's this creature that could almost, I guess people kind of sum it up to being, some people sum it up to being a hippopotamus, but the way that it describes the tail on this first creature is like a tree trunk. Obviously, the hippopotamus has like a little dangly tail on the back of them, so it couldn't be that. So they're thinking it's like maybe some type of, right? So as we move forward to the last one, it being Leviathan. Now, Leviathan's an interesting one because it being a sea creature, it being a sea dragon even is how they describe it, right? But the more you look into it, the more you think about it, you start to notice that maybe it wasn't a physical creature itself. Maybe the behemoth wasn't even a physical creature itself, but in the sense that what he was trying to point out here is the chaos in the world, right? Because as he was describing Leviathan, he was talking about who can tame Leviathan, right? Who can use whatever weapon they have and quite literally defeat Leviathan? Who can subdue Leviathan? What rope can hold him, right? Pointing out how his teeth are so sharp they could cut through anything, how he breathes fire and smoke comes through his nose.
Yeah.
Points out these different things that almost seem as if he's describing the chaos in the world, the way that the world is fallen, right? And so the way that that all comes together, at least at the end of the story, before I get into how Leviathan plays into this whole understanding of a loving God in the midst of this world, of all things that's going on in the world. I will finish the story for you. In regards to after that, after he talks about Leviathan, Job kind of just goes, God, you got it. He said, I know nothing in a sense, right? Compared to the knowledge, wisdom, understanding that you have. He said, I felt like I had had pretty much some things to say against you, but ultimately after you just displayed to me that I really don't even know some of the things based on, some of the smaller things that you were getting into, some of the simpler things you were getting into, I didn't even understand, couldn't even comprehend. He said, maybe I should come to the understanding that I couldn't comprehend truly why you do all these things in which you do, right? So at the end of it all, instead of God really explaining why he did those things, he pretty much just shows him that even if he was to explain some of the simpler things or point out some of the simpler things, he couldn't even comprehend those things. So what is even the point of trying to explain it to you in the first place? He says it's more so you knowing that I am in charge of these things, that I am in control. Ultimately, I'm sovereign over these things. And so where it came in at the end of it all was that he did restore all that he had, even giving him double back. So say he had 3 kids, he now has 6 kids. He say he had, 3,000 cattle, he had 6,000 cattle, right? And the it also says that the latter end of his life was better than the first, right? So he had an even better end of his life, right? So in a even longer life at the end of it all. With that, we see that, sure, things worked out at the end of the day for Job, but he still did go through hardship throughout that whole process. And once again, God didn't explain the reason why things happened the way that they did, but ultimately that God knows that things happen, things get hectic, and things are pretty crazy, but ultimately God is able to subdue whatever it may be, because he does point out that it is only he who could subdue Leviathan. It is only he who could put him on a leash pretty much and walk him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's pretty much saying that it is only God who is sovereign over the chaos in the world, right? And could still manipulate, could bring peace onto these things, right? So this is what we see being fleshed out in Job. And that rung a bell within me. That was something almost, I like to point out that moment where I came to Christ as like a tap on my shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
It was a moment where I remembered that he was there. Almost as if somebody's like, oh yeah, I forgot you.
My dog.
Literally, I'm like, oh man. So once I came to understanding and I was like, oh, this is another level of protection that I couldn't even fathom, it really drove me deeper into starting to seek God. And so I said all that just to say, because you were talking about how that one guy said that, you're special and you have these things to do. I didn't figure out the connection between what that prophet or false prophet, whatever you may have been, said until this moment, probably like 2 years later.
Yeah, so he was referencing Job that whole time.
Right, and it seems as though
it all kind of
it came together perfectly, right? And I think in that moment was I able to truly see what God was saying through him, right? So what I'm saying is that I genuinely believe that guy could have been right, and especially even the stuff that I've seen,
right in his own way,
that you've been displaying even through these conversations and through how long I've known you. I've seen this potential, right, within you that you could glorify God at a certain point, right, or may have already done in certain things, right, and even potentially right now as your supervisor, in the way that you were saying that you were able to help these situations at work, right, with these people that may be going through hardship or maybe going through this time where they're now stressed out and getting to a point where they're going to fight or whatever the case may be, and how you're able to have that ability to pretty much mend the situation,
yeah,
right, and I could see how even in that space could you be glorifying God whether you know it or not, right. So with that, I said that all pretty much to say that with that connection that God was able to bring there for me, right? I don't doubt that potentially happened for you, and you may not, believe that or not, right? But ultimately, I could see how that could happen just based on how it happened in my situation,
yeah,
and how that same word was used later on to connect me to the things of God. 100%.
I'm tracking. I understand the story, and I think it's actually interesting that he chose Job for you. I think that there's a lot to unpack there for a bunch of different reasons. Just speaking from my perspective, right? I guess the main thing for me is like have you ever listened to horoscopes or talked to anybody about astrology?
I used to, yeah. Around that time before I started seeking God, that's exactly what I was.
Yeah.
I was checking them out. Wasn't like super deep into it, like some people are, but I definitely started listening to it. Yeah.
Have you ever had your palm read or something like that? So when I see people talk about astrology, or I see people talk about reading tarot cards or reading your palm or whatever, I think that there's a common trend, and that common trend is being vague enough that your human brain, which is just designed to find patterns, you'll find a pattern, right? As long as there's that idea in your mind, you'll find a pattern. Right. So I think that Job is one of those stories where it's empowering, right? You find that like no matter how bad my life gets, you know, God is going to prop me up in the way that it makes sense for God to prop me up. So like I think that that could happen at any level, right? You could scrape your knee and be like, why? You know what I mean? And then your knee heals faster than you expected, and you're like, God is great. So you could also lose everything like Job, and then like, you know, get it back double or whatever, because let's just say that you're designed to hustle like that. You know what I mean? And I think it's one of those things where all of those things could happen really well. But just like God talks about how, I feed the crows every day, right? Because I know that needs to happen. I mean, crows are dying every day too, right? And like, that's God's plan as well, one would say. But like, I don't know, like if the crow can't even comprehend God or his glory, like why would a crow be like chosen to die if, let's say, hypothetically a crow just dies and that's it? It just like, you know, decomposes or whatever.
Right.
So to me, it's a nice idea. It is like, you know, no matter how bad it is, God is going to take care of me in the way that God sees fit. And for my mind, that just strikes me as like, you could say the same thing about chance. You're like, my luck could turn around at any moment, right? If you were a part of a different faith, like Buddha teaches me that I need nothing to be wealthy, right? And like, so the Stoics, like we talked about last time, there's that phrase that I think I brought this up last time, where it was, wealth is not having more, but wanting less, right? These are concepts throughout every culture across all of history, where it's one central idea, and that central idea is that it happens. You know what I mean? Like things just happen to us as human beings, and we have to learn a way to cope with that. And sometimes the way you cope with that is you say, oh, this is God's plan. Sometimes the way you cope with that, the way that I cope with it, is like, hey man, bad luck happens. You know what I mean? Who knows? Maybe something good's going to happen too.
And
right?
is that just taking the God out of it, right? In a sense that
No, it exactly is. And like,
just
so this is just like the comparison between, you know, the Greek gods all, you know, committing whatever it's called when you're like having sex with your family members.
Incest.
Thank you. Incest. All throughout Greek mythology. Right. And then you got your boy Abraham, who really the whole faith is based on Abraham and his relationship with God. Right. Across the Quran, across the Torah as well. So like, and he was kind of doing the same thing. That's a huge comparison for a thing that in today's day and age we find grotesque. So all that to say that it's a compelling story insofar as the moral. And I think that human beings do a really great job of storytelling. That's across all of human beings, all of history. It doesn't matter what corner of culture you go to. There's stories. We tell stories that have morals, and I think that's beautiful. That's why I read books. That's why I like talking to people. Like, everything in this world is a story. And so for me, the Bible, specifically Abraham, specifically Job, these are good stories that have a specific moral, but I don't see them as evidence for an all-powerful being.
And I think, but that's where I would tie in the fact that you were pointing out the morality in those stories. I think those could have potentially been, like you said, for this understanding of the morality that are presented in this story, to point out what God is doing potentially in these stories as well, right? It could ultimately be, okay, throw Job on the side, throw Abraham on the side. This is the message in both of those stories.
Yeah,
it could
100%.
And it could ultimately been that for us to ultimately be able to hear, understand, and apply in these different ways.
No, 100%.
Right. And I think, so that's what I see in there. But also, as you continue to point out morality as well, I think in the Stoic worldview, or in your worldview, where does morality even come in from, right? In the sense, like, where does it proceed from in the Stoics, or for your worldview in general?
Insofar as I understand it, because I'm not a philosopher, and I haven't studied philosophy in a meaningful sense. It's just things that I've read over time and I've applied to my life, right? So insofar as I understand it, again, philosophy is the intent of it is to learn how to live a virtuous life. And the whole intent of learning any philosophy, and we can actually rope the Bible into philosophy because in a way it is a philosophy, right? So the whole point of philosophy is how can a man live a good life? What is a good life, a virtuous life, right?
But what tells you what a good life is and what a virtuous life is?
That's the conversation. That is the whole conversation. Right. And that's why there's differences of opinion in philosophy. You got my boy Friedrich Nietzsche, who had nothing good to say about anybody's philosophy before him. He was just picking it all apart. Like you wonder, like, all right, Nietzsche, since you got it all figured out, like how are we supposed to live? But like that wasn't what he was intending to do. What he was intending to do was just to show errors so they can eventually be fixed. Right? So the point of philosophy, much like science, is to not lay out a specific framework that is like, nope, this is it, this is the last one. It's an ongoing conversation that changes with the landscape of the human mind. And so that's why when we talk about living a virtuous life now, we include things like technology and how intricate our relationships have been, or have been, at least in the past, 30 years, right? With the advent of the internet. That's something that they've never had to grapple with back in around the time the Bible took place, right? The stories from the Bible took place. So those things have to change over time. And I think that's an acknowledgement of how humans don't necessarily need to have a specific framework. They don't necessarily need to have all the rules figured out. They don't need to have the entire worldview snap into place in order to be successful as a race.
The way that we see how we do operate, though, points to the fact that there is within us this ability to understand that there is morality in the first place, right? This us caring for one another for some reason, and it's in its core, we do tend to care for other people for some reason.
Right, but if we didn't, we wouldn't exist, man.
Yeah, but that's exactly what I'm harping on. What is that core that brought that morality in the first place?
And so this is kind of my point is we don't know what that core is, right? Like you have a story that tells you what that core is, and I don't have a story that tells me what that core is. And it's an unsettling thing to say that you don't understand an incredibly important piece of information about the world, right? Like all of my friends who are religious to some extent or another, they genuinely believe that there is something more to being a human being than flesh. Right? There's the spirit, whatever you want to call it. We'll just say the spirit, your soul, right? So in their mind, you're like a meat suit, to be reductive. You're a meat suit that's being piloted by your soul. And it's scary to think like that's not a thing. It's scary to think that your brain is just operating in a way that we don't understand. And so it feels like you're behind your eyes viewing the world. But the reality is it's just eyes, and it's just perception of what those eyes see reflected back on the brain. And that's scary, dude. It feels unstable. It feels like, no, I just don't understand it. And because I don't understand it, it can't be, or it isn't. And then we're storytelling people, right? So we've been telling stories about how the world works forever and everything has been wrong. So if you see that everything's been wrong, I mean, once upon a time, we thought the earth was flat. Right. Some people still do because they're horribly confused. But, we thought the earth was flat. We got our boy Galileo to tell us nah, dude, we revolve around the sun. The sun doesn't revolve around us. Right. And so we knew that information. We had no idea germs existed. Right. No idea that germs existed. And one of the ways that we found that germs existed is we had doctors giving birth to, or helping women give birth to their babies. And then, what do they call it? Chambermaids? No. Anyway, the midwives. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So midwives were also doing the same thing, and they're not doctors. They're not trained like doctors. Right. And they found that the women and the babies that were being birthed by midwives were surviving way more than doctors. Right. What was the main difference? Just through time, they learned that washing your hands prior to doing everything was important. They didn't understand what germs were, but they knew that washing your hands helped, and so they did it. So to tie this in, I think that religion played a pivotal role in the advancement of man. Once upon a time, when we didn't understand how the world worked, we found a rule set that worked. That's why they talk about what you can and can't eat in the Bible. That's why they talk about how you need to wash your hands prior to praying. That's why they talk about how you have to have this relationship with the world where you accept the bad and understand that there will be good behind it. It gives you a framework in order through storytelling in order to understand, hygiene and how to live as a human in a way that helps you survive. And it's also like a piece of Darwinism. If you think about let's say you create a religion. Let's say you're the creator of Christianity. Just stick with me on this. I know it's going to be tough. But you're the creator of Christianity and you're like, hey, I'm going to make this rule set that says like, oh, you can't eat shellfish and you have to wash your hands and all these different things. And then the followers of you and your faith survive things that other followers don't. Right. To you, you're like, see, I know what I'm talking about. Like, you guys need to follow me. I got it all figured out. But then like in this scenario, none of it exists. You just made it up. It's a story that you're telling everybody, but you now have evidence that you're right. That's what religions do. They taught primitive man how to take care of themselves in a way that allows them to survive in the world. They taught them how to grapple with incredibly difficult concepts where we're just smart enough to think about, what is my place in all this? No other creature that we know of is burdened with that information. And it's scary to think like, why does my brain work this way? I must be special in some way or another. And then we create the concept of a soul. Like, it's scary to think that we're only on Earth temporarily and there's nothing after this. It's just black. So we create this like afterlife, right? And I'm going to finish up real quick. The short version is we tell stories to cope with the world. And I think that's a good thing. I think religion does a really good job of creating a community, by giving you guidelines to live your life by giving you, a moral compass. So you don't have to think too hard about how have I arrived at these conclusions, right? God told me to. It's that simple. So I find them to be compelling stories to help humanity live in a way that doesn't slide directly into, not narcissism. What's the word that I used last time? Friedrich Nietzsche was nihilism.
Nihilism, yes. Yeah.
And so that's how I feel about it, man. And I don't think everyone is going to be ready to contend with the world the way that I contend with it. So I understand that, my worldview isn't the most compelling. I find it to be true, an uncomfortable truth, but true nonetheless, based on the evidence that I have.
So I think the reason that I couldn't lean into that is because some of the things we see in the world in regards to purpose, for example, the fact that we feel as though we have a purpose, the fact that we strive for purposes is almost as if we have this innate understanding that we ultimately have a ultimate purpose, right? And so under that, do we see these sub purposes that we tend to make for ourselves, set for ourselves throughout our lives. And right. And so it would almost point to, for me, it would almost make sense for me to say, if we have these underlying purposes, this innate wanting to make a purpose of all this, right? It almost tells me that there is an ultimate purpose that makes us want to strive for, or strive for any purpose in the first place, right? And so, once again, not just when it comes to purpose, but when it comes to, once again, morality, and us striving and showing what morality is through our day to day, whether it be being nice to one another, showing what love is, right? Because, in a sense, us having this understanding, maybe not, surface level within our mind that we could really explain, but this deeper understanding on what love is, because God shows us what love is. Whether we physically see it or not, whether he lays it down and explains it, point blank or not, in our heart, we have this understanding on what love is, so we can kind of express that towards others. Right. And I think when we remove God from it, I think we also remove the main point of love, right? We remove the main purpose, the meaning of truly of love, right? Because in a sense, to remove God from this situation of the things in this world, and especially as it pertains to love, because according to scripture, God is love. And if God is love, to remove God from this whole situation and to still claim that you love people, what is that? What does that even look like? Is that even love itself? Right?
I think that's a valid question. Yeah. I think that the way that we experience love and the way that we experience morality, or we want morality, right? I think it's just an extension of evolution. And the reason I think that is because if you kind of extrapolate and you think like, okay, let's say that we just eradicate this like morals thing from our brain. It just never existed. You could make an argument that like maybe humans don't survive as well because they don't tend to pack up and learn how to live together, because together we're much stronger than we would be alone. So maybe they stay alone, right? And so, well, this is my point, is like over the time, the humans that eventually evolved to have a concept of morality and have a concept of love, they tend to survive better than those who don't. And so I think it's written into our genetic code because that's just the way it always was going to be. The ones that didn't evolve to have those concepts in their mind maybe stayed on their own. Maybe they killed each other because they just didn't have a framework of morality to tell them that that's wrong. And so if it is just a happy accident, and humans ultimately just evolved to have these concepts, but we don't understand them, right? We don't understand anything about the world. We don't know why the crops spring out of the ground. We just know they do. And that we know we can eat them, and we know that that helps us survive. So we don't have to understand every single concept, but we want to. And when we want to, we create stories, right? And so like, you know, some Native American cultures think that the stars are the souls of the people who lived before them, in which case, like, we know that not to be true. Like, they're just gas out there. They never could have understood that. Never in a million years, without the technology that we have to understand it. And so they told a story about this thing. And if you just like remove Christianity from that for a minute, there was a kid that was like hearing these stories from his grandparents, like just sitting on the plains, looking up at the sky and just feeling a sense of relief that there's a story there and that his life has meaning and makes sense in this context. And so I think that Christianity, it's the same thing. You guys have a story that gives your life meaning and context, and it helps you cope with the confusing things about the world that we don't understand. And I think that's okay. Like, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. I just, over the years, I like not needing a story. I like just accepting the world at its base, which is that there is no meaning, man. Like, then why be kind? To me is a bleak outlook, dude. Like, you know, if you're only being kind because there's consequences to not being kind, are you kind? Right? Yeah. Just in the same way that, like, if you know, we talked last time about temptation, and we talked about, you know, a holy man who is untempted can't be that holy, right? Same thing for Job. In the first place, right? Same exact thing for Job. Like, he can't. We don't know that
unless he was tested.
Unless he's tested, it's the same concept. And so,
well, to me, that's too far, real quick, because you had mentioned genetics. It's in our genetics.
Sure.
I would ask, why does our genetics care to even live on? Why does it have this
care? There is no care.
But that's what I'm saying. Why even form or evolve into such a place where it creates this morality standpoint where we all have now this morality too?
It's just chance, brother. I mean, like, why are certain plants a very specific shade of green? It's just over time they evolve to be that shade of green, and it just is.
Yeah, but that's just like colors, right? So because this is a little more complex in regards to how we use our morality, how we've adapted to this morality, and in what you were saying, if we evolved to have this morality.
Yeah.
Once again, if genetics don't care and it's just chance, I think it just, for me, it doesn't make sense to just to have things that are so complex and well in tune to how we operate and move as people.
Yeah, it seems like divine intervention.
It seems like to say that it's not designed or something that was programmed within us to happen in the first place would almost seem like a cop out to me, to be able to be like, all right, I could push wanting to truly know to the side and instead determine that it was just a happy accident, like you mentioned last time.
Yeah. I think that I'm struggling to come up with an analogy right now, but I understand what you're saying. If we thought that your car operated on like magic, we genuinely believe that it operated on magic, and we just had no concept of the engine, right? Or like the physics behind an engine. It's just magic happening in there, and that's like why it rumbles so much, because there's so much magic in it.
Yeah.
To me, like, we have this story of magic and it works, right? We're like, you know, the magic car does magic things. I don't need to understand it any further. And then eventually we learn, well, there's really nothing magic about it. It's just physics.
Right.
We're making the dino bones blow up and it does the thing. Right? So I think that's where we are. We're as a society, we are at the point where we think the engine is magic. Inside the engine is magic because we've been told it's magic since the beginning of time, really. Right. And then eventually we're going to learn it's dino juice. And then when it explodes, it exerts force on the piston, right? And so right before that epiphany, you would be like, well, why would you think that there's anything else? Like, I already have this compelling story that kind of tells me everything I need to know about it. And it's the only thing that makes sense right now, right? Which is fair. And that's how science works, right? Science is like, based on our understanding, this is where we're at. And then we discover a new piece of information and we're like, Now we think something else altogether.
Right. See, I don't see that going against. In this day and age, this modern day and age, I still see when it comes to that. I still see when it comes to Christianity and our understanding on the world. I think it still holds up, and I don't see how it stop or cease to hold up in the face of new discoveries, right? Because ultimately, instead of us saying that the engine or the car is running on magic, we see that the car runs on something, right? That there are things operating within this car to make it move. And what we're saying is that the car being like in what I would think of being creation itself, right? This to point out the existence of God, right? And how he set the car up to move in a specific way, or creation, right? The car would be almost something that I would allude to as creation. For example, we see the car, we see that it operates, we see that it turns on, we see that it moves, we see that it does a bunch of different mechanical things. Through that, we understand that, hold up, the way that things work with this car, it doesn't seem to be
it's designed by an engineer, right?
It seems to be designed by an engineer to work in a specific way, and it almost would allude to the fact that it was pretty much put together, just for a layman's term, to put it together in a certain way to work in a specific way, mechanically put together to work in a specific way. And I think with that, once again, I think the Christian worldview doesn't go into, oh, it's just something that we know now what it is. Yeah. It's more so based on the indirect evidence that we see. Yeah. The car has to be operating by something on the inside, and someone made those things or put those things together in a specific way, because there's no way
100%.
that it just came to be.
But you're also making my point, right? Like the car analogy is a bad analogy. I'll hand that to you. But you're making my point, right? Like you're using your reason and logic to say like something must have made this and must have designed this engine to work the way that it did. But part of my analogy is that there's a piece of information that we don't know what it is and we're missing it. And eventually we're going to see, I think, that it wasn't perfectly designed like that. It just is. Right. And that's why, I mean, engines were designed by humans, right? So like it's a bad analogy in that regard. The magic versus like understanding how the engine works, that is what I mean, is like, so eventually I think we will understand that, like how the world came to be. We will understand how the first like piece of life just kind of zapped into existence and then just evolved from there in this like runaway event. And maybe it would help to like kind of give how it makes me feel knowing that there is no point to any of this.
Okay.
So I think that the way that I understand how Christians think is that, you know, God gives them their purpose. And with God's purpose, you can live your life in that framework because there's a plan for you. And so there's a point to being alive. So for me, I view it from the opposite side, where knowing that there is no point, or feeling that there is no point, why would you ever want to live? Why would you want to be kind? Why would you want to live your life in a way that, you know, makes you feel like you're a good person or you help out your neighbors? And it's literally only because I get to make the experience that I want. And I find that incredibly empowering. I think that insofar as why would I want to come here and have this conversation with you? And it's because I enjoy the greater like goal of increasing communication 100%. And the greater goal of like increasing the base of human knowledge. The thing that you said that got me interested in coming on here in the first place is that I might give somebody a novel for them, right? So I might say something that gets somebody thinking about something in a way that they've never thought about it before. And I find that incredibly valuable. And yeah, there's people who don't care about that. And so they don't come on podcasts like this. They don't be charitable to your side of the argument. They don't act like me in a way. And for me, that's just chance too, man. My brain works the way that it works. And I'm as successful as I am because it works the way it works. And in a way, none of that's my fault. In a way, it's like an accumulative effect of how my brain is made and then my upbringing up until this point. But none of that matters, really. It doesn't matter because I am who I am. And I'm just trying to live my life in a way that ultimately makes me look back on it and be proud of the person that I am. And I don't think everybody's prepared to have that. And so they need more of a framework.
I think like, as I was saying last time, I think when you mentioned the similar idea in regards to it doesn't have to be purpose behind everything, because ultimately, and if that's the case in your worldview, you could then make the purpose.
100%.
Right, in a sense. I think, but with that, as I said similarly last time, I think I could see how that works and from our POV, we tend to, you know, Phil is the main character. Right? But I think in the world that we're living in with other people, with millions, billions of people, you know, on this earth as well. I think if we all thought in that same worldview, I think it seems like it almost lead to catastrophe, right? Because ultimately, if everyone makes their own purpose and everyone kind of drives that home, where that may end, I could almost see that based on how we are as humans, right?
Yeah.
We strive and dig to get to our pleasures. We strive and dig to get to money, right? Wealth, right? We strive and dig to get to these different things. It's almost in our innate nature to covet things and to lust after things and to do these different things. So I think majority of us, if we were to lean into this idea of being able to draw our own purpose out, I think it ultimately, eventually will lead to us just destroying ourselves, right?
This goes back to my point about our biology, right? Our evolution to get to this point. I think if we were built to all be that selfish and not work together, we would have destroyed ourselves by now. By my understanding, humans have been on this earth for 200,000 years or something like that. Like, we've evolved so long ago. I mean, I know that we domesticated dogs 80,000 years ago, and so now wolves look like chihuahuas. You know what I mean? That's crazy. That's insane. Do you think God wanted chihuahuas? It's hard to say. But human beings made chihuahuas nonetheless. So then that's just evolution, and we see the evidence of it. So then if we have this I don't know how I want to put this. If we see this evolution come to the point where none of us have a morality that makes sense to continue the human race dies off. So the fact that we're still here tells you that the morality, the evolution that allowed us to survive includes this concept of morality.
And see, that's where I guess we differ. And I guess after I say this, we get into, before we close out, some of the verses I want to pull up just to see what you think on some of those things.
I thought the stories were the verse.
Yeah, I actually have it on my phone. It's actually one I got to read out real quick. But just the last thing I want to say to kind of say the other side of what you're saying right now is, in that same space, some unfeeling thing being evolution itself, wanting for us to then come together to then be able to survive. It almost seems empty to me, right? Because the way that we kind of explain it in according to the Bible, there's a God who cares, a God who does that, God who wants this unity because he's a God of peace, 100%. Right? And he wants to bring forth this peace, and ultimately he will when, returns and such and such. So with this, I could see how with that worldview, with the understanding that scripture says of God being the one who initiated these things, God being the one who actually makes us, wrote on our hearts to have this morality. This is, for me, it seems to make the most sense in why we then have that morality versus something that doesn't feel, doesn't know, doesn't design, right, to want us to have that morality.
You understand my standpoint perfectly. You really do. God, in my opinion, is a warm blanket on an otherwise bleak reality. And my worldview is bleak. I'm not sitting here and thinking that it's going to bring everybody comfort, because I don't think it will. But I want to be able to live my life. This is the same reason I don't drink. I want to be able to live my life in such a way that I am empowered to be clear-minded and make decisions based on clear-mindedness. And that is specifically why I don't drink.
Okay.
So then for me, the philosophy of having this safety net of meaning, I find to just be another substance, really. God to me is just a warm blanket to make me feel like my life matters. And I think that's an illusion. I think that your life doesn't matter intrinsically. We create the matter, right? And so you're absolutely right. It is bleak, it is empty. But through that emptiness, we can find and create beauty. And I think that is compelling.
And that, once again, is where it gets me but what's the point? You know what I mean? Because it just brings it right back to there.
Because life is beauty, man. Think about
why bring it
if you were sitting, if you were sitting with your family watching a movie, and you guys are eating the popcorn, the candy, right? And you eat the last piece of candy, and then your hand goes searching in the bag. You're like, oh, shit, I wasn't mentally prepared for this to be the last piece of candy, right? It's a microcosm of what I'm describing to you. It's like, if you think that there's a world after this, there's an afterlife after this, then you're not going to savor that last piece of candy as much as you otherwise would. But if you're aware that it's your last piece of candy, you put a little more effort into savoring this piece.
Or you don't.
And it's your choice, right? So for me, thinking that this life, this world, is the only one I get, this experience right now is the only one that I get, I need to savor every moment of it. And I need to create as much beauty as possible, and to really just look back and think that was time well spent. So now when it's over, I'm comfortable, because I've done everything that I can to be a great person, to enjoy the beauty of the world. And like I think about this all the time because I'm like dating now, right? And through dating, you have to grapple with this kind of thing because what's the point of making these human connections, right? What's the point of like going on these first dates? What's the point of any of this? And it's like
100%.
each first date has a piece of beauty you didn't have before. And if you're just looking for it, you'll find that piece of beauty. The way my mind works is I'll be in a situation and let's say I'm having a really great date with somebody.
Right.
There's snapshots in that date of just very beautiful moments. And those beautiful moments for me is what inspires me to write. It's what inspires me to read, to find another person's like writing of those beautiful moments or of a story. And so like for me, none of this has anything to do with a higher being. And since there is no point, all I'm finding is things that I find beautiful. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think that's before I ask these, because we'll jump right into this right now. The last thing I want to say on that topic was just that drives me to, once again, similar space in being that what tells me even more, right? That you have this innate understanding, because God put that within us, is what I would believe, of what beauty is. To be able to look at things and go, this is beautiful, because beauty has a meaning. It has there's substance to beauty.
I just think that's a normal, I think that's a normal human experience. And I think that our minds just work differently enough that not everybody's aware of these experiences all the time. But that's another like awareness and like being what it means to be present and stuff. It's a whole nother conversation.
That's exactly what I was about to say. All right, so let's get into these questions because I know we're getting a little later in the episode. So there was a couple verses that I wanted to point out. I won't point out all of them because just
are you asking me to like react to these? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what's your thoughts on some of these? So there's 5 different categories, or 4 different categories. So I'll read one verse per the category, but I'll tell you what the category is just so you have an understanding of where I'm kind of going with this. And so one of them, for example, this is the only longer one that I'll touch on. The other ones are all relatively short. So this one is on the topic of God's existence.
Okay.
Right. And so in Romans 1:18-20, this is the like I said, the only longer one. So just go through this real quick. Romans 1:18-20. So it says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness, all unrighteousness of men. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has revealed or shown it to them. For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived." And this passage pretty much argues that God's existence and attributes are, in some sense, evidence in creation, right? So this is pretty much what it's supposed to be pointing out.
Okay, so when it talks about wrath of God, is it implying like suffering to some extent? Because that's how you would perceive the wrath of God, some type of suffering. So like, then is suffering evidence of God?
I think the understanding is punishment in a sense, is punishment. The evidence of God's wrath. Right.
So then the punishment, typically a punishment incurred with suffering.
I guess ultimately leading to, I guess, potentially some of the things that are done because of, sure, right, I get what you're saying, because of suffering, right? But in a sense, more so justice being done, right, in regards to people being punished for their wrongs, but also ultimately death, right? The fact that death is a thing itself, being the wages of sin is death, right? So we see that God is true, that the wages of sin is death because we die.
Yeah, for me, I feel that death existing is just the opposite, or it's the end of life, and that's it, right? Like life just exists and it just ends because nothing is forever. The earth is not forever. The stars are not forever. There will be an end time insofar as just like things will fizzle out, and that's just the way they work. Necessarily being evidence of God, I don't find compelling, because you're basically, it's the same thing with the magic in the engine. You're saying like the engine runs because of the magic, and it's like, but once we learn about everything else that we need to learn about, we'll know that's not the case.
I guess, but for that same setting, I guess it would be more so that we see evidences that magic is running this engine, magic is running this car, not just the car is moving, but more so how everything works together, that then leads to us coming to this through indirect evidence, being able to say, okay, we can't see under the hood, but based on all these other things, we come to the understanding that it has to be magic. That's
right.
And obviously that's not what runs cars, but say it was what ran cars, we're pretty much saying that we see these evidences from the vehicle that all leads to and point to the fact that magic does run the car.
Right.
You know what
So
I mean?
then this is how Christianity works to me. We open up the engine, or we open up the hood and we see the engine, and we're like,
Right.
this is a thing. It's not necessarily magic. Maybe the magic's inside. We break it all down. We find the individual pieces. These work together so well. Like something had to have designed this to be the way it is. What that really is moving the goalposts of understanding. You originally said God created the magic that makes this engine run. And then once you open the hood, you're like, oh no, it's a physical thing. There isn't magic in there. There's an engine, right? So like God created the engine that the magic's inside. And then you
open it
move
up
the
and there's
goalpost
no
again.
magic
You're
in
like,
there.
God created this piston. How else could it be the shape that it is, right? And so that's my
But
reaction.
see, I guess for that one, it'd be, we acknowledge that there's no magic in there in the first
We
place. Right?
acknowledge-
And I think initially
You're
that's
talking
the
about
understanding.
the creation of
Right.
the engine.
And that's what I'm trying to say, that the fact that, yeah, we acknowledge that there's no magic in there. We understand that God didn't use magic in the engine to create the engine. But ultimately, I guess if we're going to rephrase it, then what we'd be saying is that God created the engine in the sense, or created the things that led to creating the engine. Right.
Right.
And
I
I'm
see
not trying to move the goalpost. It's more so, I think we're less of trying to move the goalpost and more of, as we get into smaller and smaller details of it all, we're trying to explain what God did in the smaller details of things.
Yeah, but
versus
you're
the
operating
vast
from the
majority.
standpoint that God did something. And when you make an argument for anything that's evidence-based, you can't start from your conclusion and then work backward. It doesn't work that way. You have to work toward a conclusion. By saying that God created the engine, first it was God created the it runs off of magic, right? So it's God running the car. And then it was God created the engine that holds the magic. And then it was God created the piston that lets the engine run. In all three scenarios, you assumed it was God. And my worldview, you can't assume it's God. You would build your evidence to get to God created this. And so where we are in the timeline, the continuum, as it were, we've been saying that it's God for so long, we can't think of it any other way.
Right.
And that's why my worldview seems so alien.
So I guess, and I see where we're kind of butting heads at. I think the point that I'm trying to make is that when you were starting with God created the engine, right? Let's just remove the magic from it, right?
Okay.
For the sake of it, right? So we said that God created the engine, right? In a sense, us going into God created we broke the engine apart. We're like, all right, where's God's imprint on this whole thing, right? I think they understand it as you get smaller and smaller into it and more fine details. I think it's all still says the same thing, right? We're saying that God created the engine. Okay, all right, we break it down. We don't see evidence of God's creation in the engine. Creating the engine. But then we point out, this piston was created by God, and then it runs the engine the way that it does. And I think, once again, and if we're pointing out all the parts in the engine were created by God, and then we get deeper and deeper into these smaller aspects of it and say that the air used to run this engine was prepared or given by God. I think ultimately we were still saying the same thing in a sense. We didn't change our point of view. We never said that God didn't make the parts.
You're there, dude. You get it.
And so that's kind of where I'm trying to go with it.
No.
Saying
You're
that
right there,
he
and
still
you get
did
it. But what I mean is, like, you're still starting and ending with the concept that God exists and therefore did something.
And I think it's because we acknowledge that he's the beginning and the end. So I think ultimately
You acknowledge that he is the beginning,
right, exactly.
and that's what I mean. Is
Right.
like that acknowledgement by itself
Right.
is why your worldview will always contain God.
Right. But I
Okay.
think it will still stand as we go. But we'll move on. Move on for the sake of it. All right, because we got a lot more to talk about. There's only probably three more, right? Because I said one from each one. I'll read this other one. This other one is from the standpoint of the problem of morality, and its objective values, right? Well, this is from Romans 2, 14 through 15. It's a little shorter than the other one, and it's a similar idea, right? But this is what it reads. For when Gentiles who do not know or have the law by nature do what the law requires, they show that the work of the law is written on their hearts. Right? So this is kind of what I was talking about in regards to the idea that
I act the way I act because it's written.
Exactly. So through me, this is almost indirect evidence of the fact that there is a law written on my heart.
Yeah.
The fact that I'm acting in accordance to these laws that we see being fleshed out in how
Yeah.
we do our everyday.
Yeah, I mean that's like an inconvenient phrase for my worldview. It's inconvenient for me because somebody thought of this a long time ago, but I don't find it to be something that kind of like dissuades me because just like the Gentiles, or it's written on their heart, they're just doing good things. That's my argument for genetically we are predisposed to have some type of concept of continuing human life.
Oh, so like we were talking about earlier.
Because if you didn't have that, then we would have all murdered each other or left each other out to dry, and then the human race wouldn't exist the way it exists today.
And that's why I was saying that where I could see that's how I could see that I would lean away from it being evolution itself versus more so it being God because of the intentionality that we see in a lot of these things, right? Okay, all right, I see that's where we're at because we technically did flesh that one out.
Yeah, we did
earlier. So this one is the third one, second to last. This one is from 2 Corinthians 4, verse 16, 18. It's on the topic of suffering and evil, unanswered questions, right? So this one kind of goes 2 Corinthians 4, 16 through 18. It says, "For this light, momentarily affliction, is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory." So this one is pretty much saying that, as Paul says in Scripture, the struggles in this life is nothing to be compared to the glory revealed in Christ Jesus. So in a sense, in our worldview, is we believe that we could have life everlasting through Jesus Christ, right? Because he died for our sins. I think we have that understanding that this isn't just it. And with that, we can now go through suffering, go through hardship, and know that ultimately none of this would hold any weight compared to the glory to be revealed in Christ Jesus, right? There's going to come a time that all the hardship that we went through, whether we lived from 0 to 120 years of our lives in pretty much hell on earth, ultimately that moment, just standing in the presence of God, being in the presence of God, all the tears and hurt that we've had throughout our lives, having the worst of life. You could think of the worst of things that you may have went through in that 120 years. That moment, that very moment will wipe away all that. Because ultimately, it won't only just be this moment, but it'll be an everlasting moment. Right?
I'm really glad you explained this to me because I was lost.
Right, yeah.
So I think this goes back to what I was saying before about finding beauty in the world. Beauty doesn't exist without ugly. Pleasure doesn't exist without pain. These are things we use to understand the world around us, but also to like compare experiences. This duality. So how do you know that something is pleasurable? Because it feels different than the pain does. There is no beauty without ugly. There is no pleasure without pain. And therefore, experiencing hardship or suffering in the world is just human experience that maps onto all the pleasure and all of the happiness that you experience as well. Right? It's changes to the landscape of experience. That's all it is.
Okay. Sounds good. So I think the last one that I do have for you, and I'll make sure to double check it just to make sure, because there was 3 options. I think one of the other options probably would have been better for the last one, but I'll double check this one to make sure. Okay, here we see that this is our foundation for this is a call to faith or humility and reason, right? And in the sense where it proceeds for us. For example, Proverbs 9:10, it talks about how the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, right? And that's simply the verse right there. And it's just to say that because I fear God, does it bring forth this wisdom in me to move in a certain way, to do certain things, to act accordingly? And with that, does that bring a more beneficial life? With that, does it bring forth, as you said before, was that the word starts with a V, more virtuous life?
Virtuous.
And this proceeding from the understanding that, because of the fear of God, not in the fear of God as in he's going to strike me down right now, kill me if I do something wrong, but instead, because you had mentioned earlier as well, if you do things because, you're scared of a punishment, then are you really doing it for, good purposes? And I think in this sense, it's not a fear in the sense that he's going to punish me next, but it's more so a fear that it's a reverential fear, right? Just like you would fear a king, just like you would fear your father, your mother, right? Your parents, right? In the sense that you revere them, you respect them. So out of the respect, out of the reverence, do you want to walk accordingly, be obedient in certain things? But also, as you do those things, you notice that it's more beneficial to be obedient in those things. So maybe that was the catalyst to get you to start to move in a certain way, the fear of God.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you came to find out in the midst of that this is a more beneficial way to move, right?
So I'm having a strong reaction to this one.
Okay.
And I want to talk about something that's maybe uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Sure.
The framework is would you argue that it's a better father who disciplines their kids physically and makes those kids fear them, but the kid grows up disciplined and strong? Or is the father better if they teach their kids compassion and discipline from the standpoint that they just want to do a good job because it's the right thing to do, but they're not being beat and all that jazz, right?
So I think there's a combination of the two, and I say that for a reason, right? Because I'm a parent.
Just for the purpose of this question,
Okay.
which
You want me to
father
pick
would be
one?
better? Yeah.
Okay, so one just doesn't beat them physically.
Right.
That's the only difference, it seems, right?
One is leading with fear
Right.
and pain, and the other is leading with compassion.
Right. For this one is better.
Yeah.
And all right, so if I was to have to choose one, I'm gonna lean towards the compassion only solely because for me, it's not one absent of the other. I think both could play a part.
No,
together.
100%.
From compassion.
I'm just creating like a thought experiment.
Right.
And so anybody should choose the compassion.
Right.
Anybody would, if you have a leader at work, you take beating out of it. You have a leader at work who just comes up to you and is disrespectful to you, demands everything of you, doesn't treat you like a human being, but you get the same amount of work done. And then there's another leader who builds you up, makes sure you get your training, listens to you, like helps you feel valued at work. 100%. It's going to be better to work for the second one, right?
Definitely.
So I think human beings have a really bad habit of seeing the pain that they feel in relationships as finding something good that came of it. Like Mike Tyson's a great example. He grew up in one of the most horrible places in America, and it turned him into this like incredibly bad person who took advantage of too many people, hurt people all the time for no reason. And he's a product of his environment. It wasn't until he was locked up and found some type of religion that he started to change his mindset. Still made a lot of mistakes, right? But that was like a framework that helped him. Okay. So people are in relationships with people, or their loved ones all the time. Women will be in a relationship with a guy who's abusive, and that guy manipulates them by saying, you know, you'll never do better than me. You'll never be more comfortable than how I'm making you comfortable. You should be thanking me for the way that I treat you, right? And then they get out of that relationship and they realize that it was abusive. It was bad. And then they realize that they could have all the good in a relationship and compassion. So I bring up both of those points to say that the verse that talks about how God is good or God's power is evident because, or you should love God and obey God because he can strike you down. That strikes me as one, bad leadership, and two, abusive in nature, because you should, an all-loving God, an all-powerful God could give you nothing but compassion and still lead you to the exact same place he wants you to be in.
But I didn't, so just to clarify, I didn't say that he does, that's what the fear of God is, right? Because I try to explain that as well in regards to saying, I'm not referring to it in the type of fear that you would fear someone for being able to strike you down, right? That's what I was pointing out. I was pointing out that it's more so a reverential fear, right? Once again, the same way that you would fear your parent. It's like a good fear, the fear that allows you to respect them, right? Given their position, right?
And my argument is that
their authority,
that is abusive.
And I think but see, as a parent, right? This is where I was going to go with that question that you had asked. The reason I had said it could be both is because sometimes out of compassion, do you have to correct your kids? Do you have to discipline?
Absolutely.
Them? And sometimes kids don't always listen to your just verbiage and you saying certain things. Kids may not even listen to you just trying to put them in a corner, right? So I see that's where when people discipline them and they beat them with the belt or they pinch them or whatever the case may be, I can see where what they're drawing the connection of when it comes to this form of discipline is the fact that what you're doing, the wrong that you're doing leads to consequences, right? I'm not saying abuse your kids. I'm not saying beat them, right? Beat them in such an extent where you're physically abusing them, right? In that sense, but more so you're correcting, more so you're causing discipline. In a sense, I don't know if you heard that saying where it's like if you spare the rod, in a sense that you're causing wrong to your kids, right? Because in a sense, I forgot the full phrase, but pretty much if you don't discipline them, you're then going to leave them to think that there's no consequences that come with their actions, right? And I think that's where it kind of comes together, right? So there's this mercy that I show. For example, I have two that's under 2 right now. And obviously, one of them being almost at that terrible 2's age, and her being might as well be terrible 1 age. She's doing things. She's doing a lot of things. She tries to get into absolutely everything. And I won't say that she absolutely understands the wrong and all that she's doing, but she does understand certain things that are wrong and not to do it because there's plenty of times that we tell her not to do it, and she does understand because she'll acknowledge that it's wrong, right? So in that same space, there's a place where I have to show where I have to be gentle and guiding, right? But then there's also a place where it gets into, all right, now I have to correct. I have to be disciplined, right? And I have to show her that there is consequence that come with actions, right? And that's coming from a place of compassion because I feel for her, because I don't want her to turn out, you know, going into the world and having to deal with these hard truths in the world. I want her to learn that at home. So when she goes out and about, when she's around people that won't just, you know, discipline her in a good way and they discipline her in the wrong way.
No,
right?
I understand fully. I think that there is a utility to it. I think that passage talks about wrath. And I think when we talk about wrath, we're talking about on the spectrum of like, we'll say physical correction. On the spectrum of physical correction, wrath is like at the far end of it. If we're going to talk about God being perfectly compassionate and perfectly loving,
but he is just as well.
Right. But I don't view that as just. I don't view wrath as just. If you were to correct your children, I have faith that you would never just with all your muscles backhand them as hard as you can.
Right.
You would never do that because that is wrath. So using the word wrath for me is what makes that passage uncompelling, because it's to be fearful of someone's wrath is to be fearful of abuse, and an all-loving God shouldn't be abusing us. Just to articulate that I understand your standpoint. So I trained Muay Thai, and so I competed in this event, and it's comical how it happened, but the short version is it's like a low-end event where you're going to effectively fight somebody else with a lot of protective gear, but the intent is to beat them. Right. So when I finally got up to compete, the guy I was competing against was 15, and I was 34 at the time. So I'm a grown man. I've been to war, dude. Like, I can hurt this poor kid. So in my mind, he's 15, right? We have a similar amount of experience insofar as Muay Thai goes, but life experience, I'm way beyond him. I got old man strength. So I'm like, all right, knowing this kid's 15, I'm not going to hurt him. Like, this is a sparring event now. Like, we're not fighting. He hit me really hard a bunch of times. And the first time I thought, all right, well, he is probably just nervous. It's his first competition. Like, he didn't mean to hit me that hard. He just did. And then he kicked me really hard. And I was like, all right, I got to check this dude. Because he's not respecting what I'm doing. Right. So I put a little more power into one of my kicks and checked him like, hey, I could be kicking you harder, but I'm not. Right. So we continued. And he just would not let up. So now I'm striking this balance where I need to hurt him just to kind of like slow them down for one. That's also a tactic in Muay Thai. So you hurt them to slow them down, but also you hurt them in order to create a response. So every time I lift my left leg, he's going to be like, flinch. Ooh, I don't want that.
So you can do something else.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm navigating this for 3 rounds with this 15-year-old who will not quit. And I got to the end of the fight, and his dad thanked me and said, you know, I think that was perfect. And what he was talking about was me dialing it back, because I think they kind of realized I could annihilate their
right. The difference in power and capability.
So he was like, I think you did perfect. He was like, that's exactly what I needed from you. I was like, cool. So I'm walking out of the ring. His coach comes up to me, and his coach says, hey, my name is XYZ. I'm the coach of this. That's my fighter. You did perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. So I suspect anyway, this kid is just the biggest dude at his gym, because it's a small gym.
Right.
Biggest dude at his gym, puts a hurting on everybody because he's young, he's fit, like he's a big dude. And his coach wanted to teach him that there's always a bigger fish and to have some type of humility. And I agree with that lesson, especially in some type of martial art where it's like you might be the biggest, baddest dude at your gym, but there's always somebody else. And you got to check yourself and train hard. So I understand the utility of pain and suffering to teach a lesson. I question that wisdom when it comes to children. And we think about our relationship to God, him being all powerful, and we're just peons. The power differential there is analogous to parent-child. Therefore, God using any type of wrath on us as a peon, I find wrong.
Right. But in that same sense, I would say a God that, like you, 35 years old, going against 15-year-old, a God that is truly worthy, capable of doing so much more, right? That chooses to have us have certain problems that we have in this life. That,
right.
In contrast to who he is claiming to be, right? The God that brought existence into existence. All that there is.
Right.
There, you could see that power level wise, and compared to the stuff that he does allow to happen, stuff that he does make happen, what he can do is up here, right? So as I'm reading through, I do a daily bread every day. So I go on here, I go live every day reading the Bible. And so I'll have people jump in, join in the chat, and we'll talk about a couple different things. And so what I've noticed as I was reading through, Jeremiah, which was, I think the previous chapter we was reading through, what I noticed that God was doing, and this is the Old Testament, this is where things are the harshest, right? I see constantly, time and time again, as I'm reading through this, people, God's people, that he's telling, lock in, walk in the way that you should, because you know how to walk. It's this, that, and third. I've done things for you to know that I am true. They know he's true. They know what they should do and what they should not do. So now all I see after that whole space of them coming to this understanding, we see them doing the exact opposite, time and time again. I mean, back to back to. I mean, it gets bad. I mean, quite literally, what I just read, probably last book ago, because this is Ezekiel, the book right before this, it talks about how they were getting into other nations' practices or cultures' practices where they were like sacrificing their kids in the fire to Moloch, right? So they were literally throwing them in the fire and sacrificing them to a god of another nation, right? Because they believed that god was supposed to give them whatever they were supposed to get from that, right? And so they're doing this like terrible thing, right? And obviously they're doing many other things on top of that, right? And you see throughout this process, God's telling them, stop doing what you're doing. Turn from that wicked deed and wicked acts and turn back to me, right? And you see this same thing be reiterated in a different way later on, right? He's telling them the same thing. Stop what you're doing. It is wrong. It's abominable in my sight. This is literally worthy of destruction, ultimately, is the idea, right? And they pretty much tell him at some point, no, I'm good. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. And so now, after this constant...
Are they having a direct conversation with God in this scenario?
Their prophets are passing on this message. So
they're just hearing it from another human.
Right, but they know, as being his people, based on the miracles he's done, like visible supernatural miracles that he's done to them, they know, and they've had this understanding passed down from generation to generation, right? These things that they've also experienced certain things in their generation. They know that God is real. They know he's true in this space, right? And so with that, they know that certain people are representatives at the time of God. Unlike how we can talk right now through prayer, through straight to Jesus Christ. At the time, they would have to talk through a prophet, right? To talk to God or get the message from God, I guess I should say, right? Instead. So with that, this prophet that they know is a notable prophet is passing on this information, understanding that what you're doing is wrong. God is telling you to tell you these things. So they do understand that he is speaking. He is the mouthpiece of God in this situation, and they understand this. But they're pretty much saying, no, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. We're not really seeing any repercussions right now. We're just going to keep doing what we're doing. We're locked in, and we're enjoying this, right? And obviously they're doing absolutely whatever it may be. Whilst God's constantly showing them that mercy and temperance and showing them, all right, I need you to stop. I'm showing you mercy right now. I'm telling you to stop. I'm giving you warnings over and over again. And now he's like, this is where I am at now in Ezekiel, where they're now seeing the punishment, the judgment come from the acts that they were doing. Right. And so what I'm saying is that pretty much God is merciful. He is peaceful. He is loving. But out of that love, out of this peace and mercy, he is still a God that judges, right? He is still a God that upholds the law and the power, right, that he set in place. And ultimately, even though he could show, he does show mercy at times, and most of the time he shows mercy, there is times where he now has to judge, where he now has to correct, where he now has to punish. And if he doesn't, he couldn't be a just judge. This is his people, but he still has to judge them as he would judge anyone else, right? He's considered these his people, but he is also the God of the universe. He still judges other nations and such, but he is showing them constant mercies and mercies. And what I see in there is a father that understands that I have to show mercies in certain places. I have to be gentle at times, but there also comes a time where I have to show them that I am the God that I claim to be. I am truly he who brought existence to existence. Yeah. And from that status, that place of authority, I could see why he would have to carry out those things in which he speaks of. Maybe he has to cause that judgment. He has to call forth that judgment. I mean, that punishment upon them. And if he didn't, correct, 100%. And if he didn't, they would just continue in their way.
My reaction to that is, I'll try and keep it brief. If God is all powerful and all knowing and all loving to me indicates that he wants to treat us with compassion. That's something that we value over abuse. If God is saying, hey, I need you guys to do this thing, it seems to me, being all powerful, that God could convince anybody at any time for any reason. And so I'm curious, and I'm not looking for an answer, but I'm questioning why he wouldn't give this information directly. It had to be through a prophet.
So if I rewind a little bit in scripture, there was a moment that he did speak to the congregation, the whole entire
Did it work?
At the time. they got fearful. They got scared. They quite literally, he spoke from a mountain, big old voice, booming. You know it was him. It had to be God. I'm talking, it shook them at their very core.
Right. But he should be able to turn down the volume, right?
Well,
he's all powerful.
Well, that's the thing though. He is all powerful. He is holy. He has all glory, right? He quite literally is. I mean, to such an extent that, for example, in this moment, as he speaks to them, they get so fearful, like I was saying, to the core, to the point where they tell Moses, all right, we feel like if he talks to us again, we're just going to die. So how about he stops talking to us, you talk to us for him, and we're good. You know what I mean? Because we can't hear from him. We feel like
this is an interesting part of scripture I didn't know.
Right, 100%. There's so much more in here. But another part that I will point out, where he points out the fact, because God is so glorious, because he is who he is, when it comes to turning that down, the only time we see him turn that down for real is Jesus Christ, right? When he comes to the earth.
Right.
Because according to scripture, we believe that Jesus Christ is God, come in the flesh, right? In human form, right? So with that, we see in the Old Testament, before Jesus Christ was born, we see that God is talking with Moses. Moses is considered the friend of God, right? Quite literally to I guess, a deeper relationship than most people had with God. And so Moses gets to a point now where he's like, all right, we're so close. We're so, good. Let me see you. Let me see you, God. You know what I mean? I've been doing stuff.
Is this when he comes back with white hair and all that?
No. So this is the point. This is way before that, because that's the New Testament. This part is where Moses now, unless you're talking about Moses coming back white hair.
Yes.
So
isn't that after he sees the glory of God, he turns white?
He comes back and with glory on him, and he has to cover his face for like a certain amount of time, because that would almost frighten or whatever it may be for the people that see him, right? But more so, he asks God to see him, and God tells him, "You can't see me in the sense of my face and my front."
He's just John Cena.
You will surely, quite literally, he's like, because you will surely die, so funny. Right? So quite literally, God in all his glory, man in our corruption and our sin and all that we have within us, in our nature, couldn't just see the face of God because of his glory. I mean, I couldn't understand I couldn't explain the depths of this whole process.
No, I get that you can't explain the depths. I question the logic.
Right, and that's what I'm trying to get to.
Okay, cool.
Just to finish it off, in regards to the fact that he tells him, you can't see my face. You can see, he said, I'll allow you to see my back. He said, I'm going to walk past or move past, in a sense, while he's up on this mountain. He's about to see this take place. And you can see the back of me. And he said, but I'm going to cover you, in a sense, to protect you from my glory. And so, once again, this is something that we can't necessarily fathom, right? This is his glory. There's something with his glory that we couldn't even stand in his presence. There's plenty of people that in a vision went before his throne and stood before him. But once they stood before him, in even the vision itself, they fell on their faces as if dead, because they thought about, wait a second, I am a man of unclean lips amongst people of unclean lips. I'm a man that sins, that has sin upon me amongst people that are sinful. And I'm standing before a perfect and holy God. I don't know what it is, being in the presence of God, and a perfect and holy God at that. But once again, this is something that is almost unfathomable, right? Because none of us are this. So we couldn't fathom being in this place where potentially all that you've ever did will feel as if it's on full display in your head, being in the presence of one who's never sinned, one who's perfect and holy.
I understand. This goes back to my original argument from the first podcast.
Right.
Where God can't be all powerful if he can't, shield humans from dying from seeing him. He should be powerful enough that he can take a form like Jesus. So then, if he has to take a form like Jesus, and he was just schwacking those other dudes by accident, seemingly, right? Because he could have just took on the form of Jesus, and then they would have been able to see him as a man. So then, if he's all powerful,
it wasn't time to do it like that, because scripture doesn't explain.
But this is my point: is he would have then made the decision, I'm going to kill these dudes right now because I can't. It's not the time for me to be Jesus, which doesn't sound compassionate. And then so he kills these people because he doesn't take on the form that he knows he could take on in order to not kill them. Or he can't take on the form and he's learning. Kind of for the same reason that in the Garden of Eden, he asks, hey, did you guys eat the apple? Right?
Yeah, I don't think that was to come to truly know. It was more so, when you
maybe
if you
but he's asking nonetheless.
And I ask her, did you grab the cat food out of the thing? Even if I seen it on the Ring camera that we didn't set up yet. And we've been using it now for exactly that.
Okay.
Like, we could see her hanging out in here. It's like, if I see her do something, I ask her. It's not necessarily to know if she did it or not. It's more so for her to tell me.
I know. I'm just trying to highlight that he's He's an all-powerful, all-knowing being. Adam and Eve know him to be that. And so, like, in logic is that, you know, he shouldn't have to ask anything. They know that he already knows everything they've ever done ever.
Right, but I think it's similar, probably similar idea.
I don't think your kids understand that you already know.
But they do, in a sense, even if it was my wife, right? For example, even if I seen her do something, let's say on the Ring camera, and she didn't know it was there for whatever reason, and I know she did it, me asking her if she did it doesn't necessarily mean that I don't know that she did it.
Yeah.
It's just me allowing her, giving her a chance or giving her an opportunity to explain to me what she did.
I understand.
I could see that even if you know doesn't mean that you couldn't ask. You know what I mean?
I understand. And I don't have kids. So, like, I'm sure that's something I'll navigate at some point. The way that I view all this is that I think that God could talk to anybody in a voice just like I'm talking to you now because he's all powerful.
Right.
And he doesn't. God could come before anybody in the form of Jesus Christ, but he doesn't, and he killed people in the process. Either God is not compassionate enough to save their life, knowing what his presence would do to them, or he's not powerful enough to make that change when it was necessary.
So I think if the understanding is that he is all powerful, I think where I'd have to go with that isn't necessarily that he couldn't do it or he's choosing not to do it so that people get destroyed, because it doesn't necessarily say that anyone has been destroyed because of seeing him.
I thought you said
No. It was saying that
those people by
you
accident.
can't see me, or you will surely die. If you were to see my face in all my glory.
So when you brought up the people who did drop dead.
No. See, I said they dropped on their face as if dead. So pretty much almost as if you just crumple under the straight presence of
Okay, so then if death wasn't a part of it,
Right.
and let's say they just got knocked out by God.
It was more so like
he could have took a form that didn't knock him out.
It was more so like you standing before the sun in all its glory shined straight in front of you, as if it was sitting right there. That blindingness of the sun, right? You having to kind of duck away, right? And it's more
Right,
so
but the
I think
sun,
that's what
but
it's
the sun isn't all powerful.
Right.
So if the sun was all powerful, it could, give you a version of itself
Right.
that doesn't harm you.
No, but I think once again, the sun being as it is in its nature, right? You go before the sun, it will still create that same reaction to you, right? So once
But the
again,
only way this analogy works is if the sun is all powerful, because my argument is that God's not all powerful.
no, so I was explaining that because you were saying why did they crumple like that, right? And so I was just
No, I was saying, why did God allow circumstances that would make them crumple?
Right. But once again, those are one of those things that I guess we couldn't necessarily explain on why he doesn't dim down his glory or whatever the case may be, because the scripture doesn't necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, that's just my reaction
That's a great
to it.
question. That was definitely a great
Appreciate
question.
you.
And look, and I appreciate you for coming on this podcast today. I think we definitely talked about plenty of things. And we could always do another one another time. And definitely, I'm down to do another one where it's like a topic. We have a topic, whatever it may be. It could be stuff going on in the world, whatever the case may be. Where we could come back and do something like this, or even something with a panel of people, a couple people with different opinions, different ideas, and these different things, and we kind of talk about those stuff. You know what I mean? But once again, thank you for coming on and being able to
Thanks for
answer
having me.
questions,
I appreciate you.
these things 100%. And thank you guys for joining us and talking with us, listening with us, guys, as we just had this nice, chill conversation. And guys, definitely be able to have more conversations like this. I think
100%.
that a lot of people shy away from being able to have conversations like this because I guess you can't kind of sit with people that don't have the same, mindsets as you, but I think you should, right? Because that's how you are able to flesh out certain ideas. It's how you're able to at least present different ideas and sit with that and see what that, how that unfolds in your life.
It's important to feel uncomfortable, and it's important to pressure check the things that you believe to be true.
Right.
And that's across the board, politically, with religiosity, with the way that you understand your relationship with your partner, right? Talk about it and find an understanding, because that's the only way.
And I think if you're not able to, that's worrisome, right? If it's something that you believe and you're not able to really talk about that or flesh that out or defend that in a sense, I think you should be worried. You should
That's a great
look into what you're actually believing, that you're not able to talk about it, or you're not able to really have a conversation with somebody that has an opposite mindset on those topics. It should be something that you think of. And we've had some recently that had to do with that, when it comes to the Catholic Church. And that's why it's one of those things that if you can't have questions or doubts in that space, you may want to ask questions on what you believe and what you're holding to. If those people are like, yeah, we don't want you talking about
100%.
100%. So thank you guys once again for joining us on this Humble Understanding episode. Appreciate you guys once again. I would just say God bless and have a great and blessed day, guys. Thank you once again. Bye, guys.
Jesus is Lord. Reflect on his teachings and let his words guide your path. Embrace his love and share it with others. May his light shine upon you always. At the end of every podcast, I want to leave you with this thought. Take what we said today with a grain of salt. Compare it back to God's word, and may he lead you to the best understanding of it. Remember, the gospel of Jesus Christ tells us of his birth, his life, his sacrifice, and his resurrection. It's a message of love, hope, and redemption. Reflect on these words and let them guide your heart and mind. May the truth of the gospel inspire you, comfort you, and lead you to a deeper understanding of faith. Until next time, God bless you and your families, and keep seeking the truth.